Chapter 45:28. Now that everything was under the control of the vermilion bird, it would not be a big deal to kill a ghost like him in public. Moreover, the new azure dragon had appeared. It would be strange if the vermilion bird would let the former azure dragon live. Perhaps once the ghost stood up, Lin Yi would die even faster. When had the ghost ever regretted it before? Even when it was reduced to this miserable state because of its death in the secular world, even when the vermilion bird took advantage of the situation and took the position of azure dragon elder, it had never regretted it. However, now that it was related to Lin Yi, it could not help but feel a little remorseful. If it had not been for the fact that it wanted to know what had happened to the spirit beasts, it would not have continued to advance to the core hinterland of the tranquil area after successfully scaring off the West Mountain Elder. It should have immediately found an exit to escape from the dangerous South Island. In that case, Lin Yi would not have ended up in this near-death situation. It could be said that if Lin Yi died here today, it would be because of the ghost. Although the ghost had always been unruly and free, it was often very protective of its own people. In its eyes, Lin Yi was already one of its own, but now it had caused him to die. It would be strange if it did not blame itself and feel remorseful. Senior, life and death are decreed by fate. If it wasn't for you, I would have been captured by the West Mountain Elder and made into a puppet. Besides, I wanted to come to this place, so you don't have to blame yourself. Lin Yi, of course, could guess what the ghost was thinking and immediately comforted it with a smile. Boy, you're really open-minded. The ghost could not help but look at Lin Yi again. For a moment, it was a little nervous and lost, but now it had disappeared and it was as calm as usual. This boy was really a person who was born for big occasions. Influenced by Lin Yi, the ghost quickly regained its composure. It could be said that it had also accepted that it would fight to the death at most. It had not been defeated in the secular world and had been tenaciously holding on until now. Now it had returned to the territory of the spirit beasts. Could it admit defeat and admit defeat? Lin Yi and the ghostly thing were no longer nervous, but the fatal crisis was still right in front of them. It was true that they were unafraid of death, but it didn't mean that they wouldn't die just because they had this awareness. The terrifying coercion of several spirit beast guards fell on the top of Lin Yi's head at the same time. Before they did anything, the grass under Lin Yi's feet suddenly sank a lot. Everything visible within 3 meters was instantly squashed, and the grass and stones were crushed into dust that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. This was the terrifying coercion that was above the giants of the mountain opening period. Back at the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, the divine nun of the East Sea had used her aura alone to kill the late golden core Chen Ketian. But now Lin Yi was facing the same danger as Chen Ketian, and the pressure was much stronger. After all, this was an existence that was above the giants of the mountain opening period, and it was even a few spirit beast guards attacking together. If it was any master of the golden core stage, even if it was an evil cultivator like Cheng Haonan who suppressed his strength, if he was in Lin Yi's current position, he would definitely die. Even if he didn't die on the spot, he would at least be seriously injured. However, Lin Yi didn't say a word, and he forcefully resisted this inhuman powerful oppression. This kid is tough enough. The group of spirit beasts, who originally disdained a small character like Lin Yi, praised him in their hearts. They knew the strength of the spiritual beast guards clearly. Even if it was them, it would be difficult for them to withstand it. They didn't expect that this kid with only the strength of the golden core stage could actually withstand it. However, the group of spirit beasts looking up to him wouldn't change Lin Yi's fate. What could he do even if he was tough? Those who angered Elder Vermilion Bird would still die in the end. Moreover, this kid's answer was indeed very suspicious, so it was reasonable to kill him. Seeing that the 2 top elders, Vermilion Bird and Azure Dragon, were indifferent. Several spiritual beast guards suddenly understood that they would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Although the possibility of this golden core stage kid being a human spy was slim, the matter announced today was of great importance. If the news was leaked in advance, it would easily cause trouble, so they had to guard against it. Since Vermilion Bird and Azure Dragon both meant this, the spiritual beast guards naturally wouldn't disobey their immediate superiors for Lin Yi who they didn't know. They immediately revealed a strong killing intent, and they wanted to obliterate Lin. The shadow of death enveloped Lin Yi's whole body. His blood was instantly solidified, and he couldn't move. In the face of such an enemy, with Lin Yi's current strength, let alone resisting and escaping, he couldn't even move. When facing the West Mountain Elder, he could still use the extreme butterfly microstep to fight, but now it was simply an extravagant hope. He could only wait for death. I'm not willing. No one would be willing to die here inexplicably, and Lin Yi was no exception. However, the disparity in strength between them was so great. What else could he do but wait for death? Seeing that he was about to die, a hoarse voice suddenly came from the high platform, causing several spiritual beast guards to stop their movements. Let him go. I think he seems to be a member of the Big Fire Lion clan. He does live in the Lufeng forest. Today is such a good day. It's not auspicious to kill your compatriots. Let's get back to business. Don't waste everyone's time on irrelevant trifles. The person who spoke was the spiritual beast king who hadn't spoken. As the new spiritual beast king, he was theoretically the absolute protagonist of the spiritual beast clan. However, from just now until now, this spiritual beast king could be said to have no sense of existence at all. The focus and the right to speak were in the hands of Vermilion Bird and Azure Dragon. He was like a puppet. However, it was such a puppet that suddenly spoke at this time and was ready to pardon Lin. This was really beyond the expectations of all the spiritual beasts present. Vermilion Bird and Azure Dragon were stunned. Even Lin Yi and the ghostly thing were stunned. They did not know this new spirit beast king at all. In fact, they even suspected that he was a fake and did not possess the bloodline of the spirit beast king at all. He was merely a fake that the Vermilion Bird had found to deceive them. However, they did not think that such a suspicious fellow would suddenly open his mouth to help them. Just what kind of situation was this? Vermilion Bird was the first to react. An obscure haze flashed across her long and narrow phoenix eyes, but she appeared respectful on the surface. As the king commands, you can all leave. Chapter 45-29. Lin Yi let out a long sigh of relief and reached out to wipe the beads of sweat off his forehead. If the Vermilion Bird had stayed for a while longer, he would have been crushed into a pile of minced meat by the Vermilion Bird's coercion. This time, he had truly escaped death from the gates of hell. Kid, hurry up and thank the king. Otherwise, based on your suspicious identity, you will certainly die today. The Vermilion Bird glared coldly at Lin Yi with an obvious hint of anger in its eyes. The Vermilion Bird was furious not because of Lin Yi, a nobody like him, but because of the fact that the spiritual beast king had dared to go against it in public. After all, this so-called new spiritual beast king was a puppet that the Vermilion Bird had single-handedly groomed. He must act according to the Vermilion Bird's will at all times and on all occasions. Previously, he had behaved himself, but today, he had suddenly interfered with the Vermilion Bird's orders. It could even be said that he had publicly slapped the Vermilion Bird in the face. Was he trying to rebel? However, what angered the Vermilion Bird even more was the fact that although it could order the new spiritual beast king around in private, it could not do so in public. Since the new spiritual beast king has been crowned, everyone in the spiritual beast clan, including the Vermilion Bird Elder, must bow down to the new spiritual beast king and must not show the slightest bit of disobedience. Even though the Vermilion Bird was holding the emperor in order to command the nobles, it must still be done on the surface. Everyone was well aware of the situation, but it could not be exposed in public. Otherwise, this so-called emperor would lose his legitimacy, and the so-called emperor in order to command the nobles would naturally be out of the question. Therefore, even though it was furious, the Vermilion Bird had no choice but to endure under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Not only did it have to endure, it also had to support the spiritual beast king more than any other spiritual beast. It was not allowed to hesitate at all. When the spiritual beast king speaks in public, the other spiritual beasts may have some room for doubt. However, only the Vermilion Bird must treat it as the king's order and carry it out to the letter. Otherwise, it would become a laughing stock. After all, the Vermilion Bird had single-handedly supported its master. If it did not take it seriously, how could it expect anyone else to take it seriously? Of course, once the spiritual beast convention is over and the vermilion bird closes its doors, it does not matter how it plans to teach the spiritual beast king a lesson. It would all depend on the vermilion bird's mood. Thank you, my king. Lin Yi quickly bowed and cupped his fists. At the same time, he took the opportunity to take a good look at the noble being who was shrouded in the rainbow-colored bamboo hat. He was pondering the same question as all the spirit beasts present. Why did this guy suddenly speak up to help him out of this predicament? Others might not have noticed it, but the other party had intentionally mentioned the Great Fire Lion tribe. Could it be that he was referring to something else? Although Lin Yi wasn't a great flame lion, it was one of the only two species among all the spirit beasts that had a close relationship with him. If there wasn't any evidence, how could the other party be so sure that he was a member of the Great Flame Lion clan? Lin Yi was completely confused. However, it was obvious that no one would clear his doubts on such an occasion. The mysterious new spiritual beast king fell silent after he had finished speaking. No one knew what it was thinking, and because it was covered by the rainbow-colored bamboo hat, even its expression and eyes could not be seen. It gave people a feeling of mystery. It was mysterious. If this had been any other time and occasion, Lin Yi would have wanted to find out more about the new spiritual beast king. Perhaps he would be able to gain some unexpected gains. However, that was no longer possible now. He could not stay in such a troublesome place for long. Before the vermilion bird and the other spirit beasts regretted their decision, he quickly turned around and left. He watched helplessly as Lin Yi's figure disappeared into the dense forest. On the other hand, the other spirit beasts did not react much, but the vermilion bird's face could not help but turn gloomier. It simply could not understand why the puppet king, which it supported, would suddenly interfere in this matter. No matter how it looked at it, this was simply an insignificant matter. To any of the spiritual beasts present, killing a mere gold core stage cultivator was not a big deal at all, not to mention the high and mighty king of spiritual beasts. For such an insignificant character, what was the point of the king of spiritual beasts specifically speaking out and even going against the Azure Dragon and himself in front of everyone? Ever since it was raised to the position, this king could be said to be tactful. It had always listened to the vermilion bird's words and basically never spoke. Even if it occasionally spoke, it would definitely follow the script that the vermilion bird had given in advance. Therefore, the vermilion bird had always been very satisfied with this. However, the vermilion bird also knew that no matter who was in the high and mighty position of the spiritual beast king, once it had tasted the taste of power, it would never be willing to be a puppet that it could manipulate. At a certain time, there would always be various kinds of disobedient attempts and actions. This was inevitable. The vermilion bird was already mentally prepared for this. However, in its opinion, even if the puppet king wanted to get rid of its control, it would definitely choose to speak out on some important matters. After all, only then would it have the opportunity to promote the authority of the spiritual beast king. But now, this was an insignificant matter. Why should it interfere? Even if the vermilion bird had to make a concession in front of the public, as the spiritual beast king, what benefits could it get? Perhaps only the gold core stage spirit beast that was released would be grateful to it, but this kind of small character was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. Even if it was roped in, what use would it have? The Azure Dragon turned its head and looked at the vermilion bird. It was also bewildered. Avoiding the eyes and ears of all the spirit beasts present, it immediately connected its divine sense to the vermilion bird. It pointed at the spiritual beast king and said, "What is this guy trying to do? Could it be that he wants to take advantage of this spiritual beast convention to make his presence known in front of everyone and let everyone think that he, the king, is caring for his people and wants to win people's hearts? Isn't he a little too naive? Benevolent policies may work on humans, but in the spiritual beast clan, which held strength in high esteem, it was not feasible at all. If one's strength was not enough, regardless of whether the spiritual beast king was benevolent or not, those powerful spirit beasts would have already bitten him and he would not even be able to keep his life. Chapter 45-30. The vermilion bird suddenly felt that the puppet king that it had found was not as simple as it thought. This fellow's schemes were much deeper than it had expected. Unspecified currency, however, even though it had seen through the other party's intentions, the Vermilion Bird could not disobey the order in public for such a small matter. After all, it was in public and the other party was the absolute ruler of the Spiritual Beast clan. The Vermilion Bird could not lose the bigger picture because of a small matter. As a matter of fact, if one were to think about it carefully, they would realize that the Puppet King's move seemed meaningless and inexplicably useless, but it was actually a trick that had its own meaning. If the Vermilion Bird chose to tolerate it in public, it would give the other party room to take a yard after taking an inch. In other words, it would give the other party the capital to negotiate with the Vermilion Bird. In order to prevent the other party from meddling in the crucial issues in the future, the Vermilion Bird had to make a certain degree of concession. It had no other choice. If the Vermilion Bird chose to disobey the order in public, the problem would be even more serious. Even if it and the Azure Dragon joined forces to control most of the forces of the Spiritual Beast clan, one should not forget that there were still two other top-notch elders eyeing them covetously. They were both ambitious and powerful characters. They did not dare to act rashly now, but once they caught hold of the Vermilion Bird's weakness, they would definitely not hesitate to use the banner of purging the Emperor. That would be a headache. Thinking of this, even the Vermilion Bird could not help but be secretly shocked and broke out in cold sweat. It was clearly just a seemingly meaningless impromptu move. In the end, it did not expect such a deep scheme to be hidden behind it. It was really a little scary. The Vermilion Bird could not help but take a deep look at the Spiritual Beast King under the colorful bamboo hat. It hoped that it was thinking too much. Otherwise, it was afraid that there would be endless troubles in the future. The Vermilion Bird and the Azure Dragon were secretly on guard, but the Spiritual Beast King was as calm as water. It did not have the slightest intention of interfering with the appointment of the governor of Demon Lung City. It just sat there quietly with its face mask facing the direction where Lin Yi had left. No one knew what it was thinking. After leaving the venue of the Spirit Beast Convention calmly, Lin Yi immediately went all out without any hesitation. He risked his life to use the extreme butterfly subtle steps that he had yet to master. His figure turned into a ghost that shuttled through the dense forest, quickly distancing himself from the large group of extremely terrifying spirit beasts. Even though he was pardoned by the Spiritual Beast King, Lin Yi knew that he did not have the chance to dawdle. His excuse of leaving was to find a place to relieve himself. Naturally, he could not drag it out for too long. If he did, the spiritual beasts would definitely notice that something was wrong and he would not be able to escape. But even so, Lin Yi's actions were actually very risky, because the Vermilion Bird had been using its divine sense to monitor the entire scene. Once it sensed that Lin Yi was rapidly escaping, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, the Vermilion Bird was now wholeheartedly pondering how to deal with the King of Spiritual Beasts. For a short period of time, it wouldn't continue to monitor the entire area with its divine sense. Moreover, an insignificant character like Lin Yi wasn't within the scope of its attention. Thus, it wouldn't deliberately search for Lin Yi's position. Even if he ran away, it would only think that he was afraid and didn't dare to come back. This continued for a full incense stick of time. At least 100 miles away from the Spiritual Beast Convention, Lin Yi's heart, which was suspended in the air, calmed down a little. He let out a long breath with lingering fear. This time he really escaped from death. It was purely a fluke. But even so, Lin Yi did not dare to stop completely. Instead, he used the super butterfly subtle steps to continue running. He didn't know whether the Vermilion Bird had locked onto him or not. He also didn't know how far the Vermilion Bird's divine sense could cover. To be on the safe side, of course, it was better to escape as far as possible. As for not continuing to use the super butterfly subtle steps, this was something that couldn't be helped. This kind of state of extreme stimulation was destined to pay a great price. If it continued for a little longer, a large number of cells in the body would immediately die of overwork. That was an act of self-harm. Even though Lin Yi had the ability to heal himself, he didn't dare to mess around like this. Good steel should be used where it mattered most. He could only use the super butterfly subtle steps when it was necessary. Normally, it was better to maintain the super butterfly subtle steps. Anyway, this speed was already very fast. While running away, Lin exclaimed in his heart, "I didn't know that this new spiritual beast king is really a good person. Oh no, a good spiritual beast." When he was suppressed by the pressure of the spiritual beast guards just now, he didn't move at all, as if he wouldn't change his expression even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. In fact, how could that really be the case? Just now, his heart almost exploded from fear. If he had been a second late, he would have died without a burial place. It was really too fucking thrilling. That new spiritual beast king is a little strange. Could it be that you know him? At this moment, the ghost was also puzzled. This time, even he felt that he would definitely die. He didn't expect that he would survive the disaster, and in this way, it was really puzzling. Pfft. Lin almost choked. With a strange expression, he said, "Senior, even you, the former Green Dragon Elder, don't know him. I'm just a human cultivator who came from the secular world. How could I know the spiritual beast king?" That's true. The ghost also thought that it was quite impossible, but the doubt in its heart still lingered. But if it doesn't know him at all, what did it mean just now? And it said that he's from the Great Fire Lion clan in Lufeng Forest. Could it be pure guesswork? It doesn't make sense. In its position, there's no reason for it to come out and save you. That I don't know. Maybe it's really guesswork. I mentioned Lufeng Forest, and there really aren't many spiritual beasts in Lufeng Forest now. In the whole clan, there are probably only great fire lions and big spiders there. It's not completely impossible to guess. Lin Yi thought for a while, then said, "Besides, even if it knows me, it can't recognize me like this, right? I'm still wearing the Thousand Silk mask." It's true that you're wearing a mask, but you've only changed your appearance. Your body and voice haven't changed at all. You might be able to fool strangers, but it's impossible for you to fool people with your true intentions, the ghostly thing denied. That doesn't make sense. I've never had any interaction with this new spiritual beast king. It has never seen me before, and I've never seen it before. I don't even know what kind of spiritual beast it is. Lin Yi shook his head, then his eyes suddenly lit up. If we really have any interaction, it's more likely to be you, Senior. Could it have sensed your aura? Chapter 45-31. Then he realized that the king of spirit beasts seemed to help Lin Yi out of trouble, but in fact, it was also helping him out of trouble. In any case, it was more likely that the ghost thing had an intersection with the new king of spirit beasts. Maybe it had really sensed it. Plus or minus, what was more, at the spirit beast conference just now, the spirit beast's breath on Lin Yi was disguised by the ghost thing. Although ordinary spirit beasts were unlikely to see through this trick, it might be possible for the king of spirit beasts. Even if it was just a puppet king hired by Vermilion Bird to deceive people, it should have some skills. The new king of spirit beasts sensed the ghost thing's breath, and then suspected that Lin Yi was the ghost thing's man, or even the ghost thing itself, so it suddenly helped Lin Yi out of trouble. This was probably the most reasonable explanation. As for why the king of spirit beasts did this, it was the same as what Vermilion Bird and Azure Dragon were worried about. The new king of spirit beasts might not be willing to be a puppet manipulated by others. In any case, it was very lucky to escape successfully. After being scared, not only did Lin Yi not dare to stay in the South Island for a long time, but even the ghost thing, which had originally wanted to walk around, was forced to give up the idea. This time, it was lucky that the king of spirit beasts helped it out of trouble, but if it had to do it again, it would really die without knowing how it died. Therefore, the ghost thing did not dare to take it lightly. After escaping, it instructed Lin Yi to find a way to escape from the South Island, and Lin Yi obviously had no objection to it. It was true that the South Island was a natural treasure house for human practitioners. If there was a chance to adventure here, there should be a lot of unexpected gains, but the premise was that one must have the strength to do so. With Lin Yi's current strength, he could be regarded as a top master in the South Sea, but he was nothing in the South Island. If he did not have the consciousness of sacrificing himself to be the food of spirit beasts, it was better to think less about treasures of heaven and earth. The more he thought about it, the faster he would die. The more he thought about it, the faster he would die. There was only one thing on Lin Yi's mind now, and that was to escape from the South Island as soon as possible. However, he came in through the dark cold sea's turbulent whirlpool this time, so it was impossible for him to go back the way he came, because it was only a one-way passage. Even the West Mountain Elder Master couldn't go against the current, let alone Lin. The ghost had pointed Lin Yi to another exit that was closer to the verdant arc waters. It was not a whirlpool but a teleportation array. However, if Lin Yi wanted to reach the exit teleportation array, he would have to cross at least 2 large cultivation city districts. One could imagine how dangerous it would be. Because of the Spirit Beast Convention, passing through the settlement area was not a big problem. After all, the slightly stronger spirit beasts had already been summoned by the vermilion bird. The remaining spirit beasts were only at the gold core stage or even weaker. Moreover, they were generally not aggressive. The only reason for these weak spirit beasts to exist here was to become the food of those powerful spirit beasts. Naturally, they could not pose any threat to Lin. However, after leaving the settlement area, Lin Yi would be in trouble. Next, he would have to face the spirit beasts. They were all powerful existences above the nascent soul stage. The spirit beast clan was a gathering of masters. In this area alone, there were many who were comparable to the masters of the profound ascending stage. Some dangerous places even had mountain opening stage giants. If Lin Yi dared to step into their sphere of influence, he would definitely die. Fortunately, with the ghost's constant guidance, he could always avoid those existences that he couldn't afford to provoke. Otherwise, if it was just Lin Yi alone, even if he had 100 lives, he would have to suffocate to death in this South Island. Not to mention him, even the West Mountain Elder Master, the evil cultivator giant. They had been tossing and turning in the South Island for more than a month. They had gone around the gates of hell several times before they finally stumbled and escaped from death. Switching back and forth between the Super Butterfly Microsteps and the Extreme Butterfly Microsteps, Lin Yi's whole person turned into a ghost, shuttling quickly in the vast jungle of the South Island, and it took him a whole month to do so. The South Island was vast and the forest was so big that people who had not experienced it personally could never imagine it. In this month, Lin Yi had been moving at high speed from beginning to end, except for the most basic rest time. Especially when he used the Extreme Butterfly Microsteps, his speed was so fast that it made people's hair stand on end. Even so, he could barely cross 2 areas. Of course, he couldn't keep walking in a straight line in the jungle. He had to avoid special terrains such as rivers, mountains, and swamps in advance. According to the ghost, any of these places had an owner. The spirit beasts that could occupy these places were far from what Lin Yi could provoke now. At the same time, Lin Yi also had to avoid the places covered by the miasma. Although he could avoid being eroded by the miasma with his true chi, the problem was that the miasma would greatly affect his perception. In a place like the South Island, once his perception was limited and he continued to wander around, he would die no matter how many lives he had. In addition, he naturally had to try his best to avoid the gathering places of those spirit beasts. If he was only discovered by 1 or 2 spirit beasts, as long as their strength was not too strong, Lin Yi could always escape with his speed. However, if he provoked a large group of spirit beasts, not to mention Lin Yi, even the West Mountain Elder Master couldn't fight his way out of the encirclement. Super fast speed, the ghost's guidance. In addition to the third crucial condition, Lin Yi could finally successfully escape from the South Island, and that was the spirit beast's aura disguised by the ghost. All spirit beasts were extremely sensitive to human cultivators' auras. In fact, they were even more sensitive than sharks in the sea when it came to the smell of blood. Even though Lin Yi was very good at hiding his aura, hiding was different from camouflage. There would always be an unnatural sense of abruptness. Human beings might not be able to detect it, but the extremely sensitive spirit beasts could always see through it. It was impossible for Lin Yi to cross the 2 areas without leaving any flaws. In this case, Lin Yi was basically like a light bulb in the dark in the forest of the South Island. It was impossible for him not to attract attention. Fortunately, the spirit beast's aura disguised by the ghost perfectly solved this flaw. Lin Yi would only be able to make it through the two zones if he had all three of them at the same time. He wouldn't be able to escape if he didn't have any of them, since he wasn't as strong as the West Mountain Elder. If it was really the last resort, the West Mountain Elder Master could use his strength to make up for it, but Lin Yi would only end up in one way, which was to wait for death. Therefore, there was no room for error in him at all. One mistake would lead to death. Chapter 45-32. Fortunately, the worst-case scenario didn't happen. After a whole month of tension, Lin Yi finally made it to the exit transmission array. But even so, he was still in a mess and even injured. Crossing two whole areas, no matter how careful Lin Yi was, there were still a lot of powerful spirit beasts encountered on the way. Fortunately, most of them ignored Lin Yi. First, Lin Yi had a ghostly disguised spirit beast aura on his body. For those powerful spirit beasts, a human gold core stage master was a delicious dish, but a gold core stage spirit beast was only enough to fill the gap between their teeth. Second, the speed that Lin Yi showed was really extraordinary. Even if those powerful spirit beasts saw him, they were too lazy to chase. A spirit beast, like Lin Yi, was definitely the most unwelcome prey. A small character in the gold core stage was not even an appetizer in the eyes of those powerful spirit beasts. But he ran very fast. Not to mention whether they could catch up. Even if they could catch up, it would take a lot of effort. The consumption in the process alone could not be made up for even eating 10 Lin Yi. It was absolutely not worth the loss. So, although the aura on Lin Yi's body was weak, there were really not many spirit beasts that really attacked him. Even if he was occasionally unlucky, the other party often tried a little bit. When they saw that it was not easy to catch up, they simply did not chase. However, walking in the dark for a long time, there would always be times when you would see a ghost. In this month, although most of the time it was smooth, there were a few times when it was really dangerous. The degree of danger, even if it was not as dangerous as the pursuit of the West Mountain Old Sect, was definitely not much worse. Every time, Lin used all his trump cards and risked his life to barely escape. Being injured was still a small matter. To be able to smoothly reach the exit transmission array, and at the same time to not break his arms and legs, Lin Yi could be said to be blessed. In this month, there was endless sadness and frustration. Lin Yi was so shocked that he lost a lot of weight. Looking back at the path he had taken, he felt like crying tears of bitterness. Back then, when Tang Seng and his disciple went to the West on a pilgrimage for Buddhist scriptures, they were probably no better than this, right? In theory, the physical strength of a cultivator at the gold core stage was already at a monstrous level. However, they could not withstand a whole month of running for their lives. Not only was it a huge test of endurance, but at the same time, they had to be constantly on guard against sneak attacks from spirit beasts. If it was an ordinary person, they would have long been driven crazy. Even a cultivator of a higher level would not be able to withstand it. However, not only had Lin Yi persevered, but he had also treated all of this as a rare opportunity to cultivate. Pressure was motivation. It was not easy to find so many powerful spiritual beasts to supervise one's cultivation. Of course, it wasn't realistic to directly break through, but once one's body and will reach the limit, they could become more pure and powerful. This was without a doubt. At the same time, Lin Yi had completely mastered the extreme butterfly subtle steps after a month of hard training. The corresponding super physical technique and extreme physical technique had also become more handy. This was at least equivalent to half a year of hard training. Not only that, now even Lin Yi's temperament had faintly changed compared to a month ago. Although he was still calm and restrained, his bones were more tenacious. However, his bones were even more tenacious and indomitable, like a pine tree deeply rooted in a boulder. On the surface, there didn't seem to be any difference, but his roots had already expanded from 100 feet to 200 feet. Or even more. The deeper the root, the more stable the foundation, which meant that the foundation was more abundant. The gains he'd made this month were far more valuable than a breakthrough on the surface. He'd been forced to run for his life, but from a certain perspective, he'd gained quite a lot this time. There was an empty space in front of him without any spirit beasts guarding it. There was a teleportation formation not far ahead, which was similar to the teleportation formation that he had seen in Lufeng Forest. This situation made Lin Yi feel relieved. If this teleportation formation was heavily guarded by the spirit beasts, it would really be fucked. Fortunately, the situation was much better than expected. While there was no one around, Lin Yi quickly walked into the teleportation formation. Unlike the teleportation formation in Lufeng Forest, that teleportation formation could be activated with a token. However, this teleportation formation obviously didn't have a token, and it required ready-made spirit jades. In principle, each activation of the teleportation formation required a large amount of heaven and earth's spirit. Although basically every teleportation formation was designed with a formation that could collect the surrounding heaven and earth's spirit to maintain the normal operation of the teleportation formation, it could only ensure that the teleportation formation didn't break down. It was obviously unrealistic to use it to satisfy frequent teleportation. Therefore, every time before using the teleportation formation, high-quality spirit jades had to be added to the core of the teleportation formation. At the very least, it needed a few hundred, and at the very most, it needed thousands of spirit jades. This depended on how exquisite the teleportation formation was and how far it could be teleported. But this teleportation formation required a total of 3,600 spirit jades to be activated. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel lucky that he had the space in his jade pendant. If someone else saw this requirement, they would be dumbfounded. It wasn't that they couldn't afford this amount of spirit jades. The problem was, who would have so much time on their hands and run around with so many ready-made spirit jades? Even if they had brought them with them in the beginning, they would have definitely thrown them away when they were running for their lives. Now they could only watch helplessly. If they wanted to cry, they would have no tears. There were originally spirit jades in the core of the teleportation formation, but they had no spiritual chi. Obviously, they had been used. Lin Yi moved these waste jades into the space in his jade pendant. At the same time, he replaced them with 3,600 spirit jades and put them in. Then he quickly stood in the teleportation position and the teleportation began. Lin Yi had experienced the teleportation process more than once or twice. However, every time he experienced it, he always had an inexplicable feeling. It was like a talented primary school student facing obscure and difficult mathematics questions. Although he couldn't understand them at once, after seeing them many times, he would unconsciously understand them in his own way. Every time, he could make a little progress. Maybe one day, he would be able to understand all of them. The whole teleportation process was extremely short. After a blink of an eye, Lin Yi had already appeared in a new place. Naturally, under his feet was the teleportation formation. In front of him was still the symbolic dense forest of the South Island. However, the scene behind him was really a bit scary. It was a huge swamp. In a primitive place like the South Island, swamps were not strange. During the previous month's escape, Lin Yi had seen them many times. Even earlier, he had to rely on the swamp to get rid of the pursuit of the old master of West Mountain. However, it was the first time for Lin Yi to see such a terrifying swamp behind him. Chapter 45-33. The other swamps were uniformly black, but the swamp behind him was colorful. From a distance, it looked like a natural dye vat. The point was that this was not an ordinary dye vat, but a boiling dye vat that was bubbling with steam that could distort space. Smelling the strange smell that made people feel dizzy, Lin Yi could not help but frown. Before he was teleported, he thought that this place would be shrouded in miasma, but there was no miasma. Instead, it was a strange swamp. "Senior, what is this place?" Lin Yi covered his nose and asked curiously. There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. He had been suffering from sequelae for the past month, so he was much more vigilant than before. His intuition told him that there must be something wrong with this swamp. "This is the 5-poison swamp," the ghost answered. "Poisonous?" Lin Yi was slightly stunned. It was normal for this swamp to be so poisonous. However, Lin Yi not only noticed this appearance, but also a more critical feature. But the spiritual chi in this place seems to be very abundant. Hideous and ugly was his first impression of this five-poison swamp. However, if he looked closely, he would find that the density of the spiritual chi in this place was simply outrageous. Although there were many places with abundant spiritual chi on Heaven Stage Island, it was extremely rare to see such a density. At least, Lin Yi had never seen it in a natural environment. Almost every bubble that bubbled out of the swamp contained extremely rich spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Of course, it was not just spiritual chi of heaven and earth, but also some other poisonous gases. Otherwise, it would not live up to the name of the five-poison swamp. Well, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth here is indeed abundant. Looking at the whole South Island, there are only a few places with a higher concentration of spiritual chi than here. If this place was not so dangerous, there would be a lot of spirit beasts coming here to freeload the spiritual chi. Maybe they would even fight to occupy this place, and blood would flow like a river, the ghost said. This place is dangerous? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. Although the smell was indeed a little unpleasant, if it was just poison, it shouldn't be enough to make people flinch. Especially since many spirit beasts were talented and even had the innate immunity to poison, they wouldn't be afraid to come here just because of a little poison, right? Jie, kid, don't underestimate this five-poison swamp. Its poison isn't the kind that ordinary people know of. It's because this swamp naturally contains the power of the five elements. Basically, spirit beasts and human cultivators who don't get close to it will be attacked by it. The five elements kill each other, and entering it means death. It doesn't matter if you're immune to poison, the ghostly thing explained. I see. Lin Yi finally understood, but he didn't continue to pursue the matter. No matter how rare this five-poison swamp was, it had nothing to do with him. Now that he had survived a disaster, what he wanted to do the most was to quickly return to the verdant Arc Sea. Then he turned around and went back to North Island. Through this dense forest you'll reach the verdant Arc Sea. As for how to get to the verdant Arc City, it's up to you, kid. The ghostly thing knew that Lin Yi was eager to return, so it immediately pointed out with a smile. Okay. Lin Yi was immediately overjoyed. Immediately, he stopped looking at the five-poison swamp and performed the super butterfly microstep to pass through the dense forest in front of him. As expected, after a short while, he saw the vast sea. Although it was hazy under the sea mist, Lin Yi was in a good mood at this moment. But Lin Yi was in a great mood right now. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of attracting the nearby spirit beasts, he would have yelled out loud to relieve the pressure. After all, the pressure in the past month was really great. Fortunately, he finally escaped. According to the ghostly thing, the verdant Arc Sea was in front of him, but after all, Lin Yi was still standing on the cliff of the South Island. There was no way he could get a free ride. No ship dared to get so close to the South Island, not even the overlord of the South Continent's escort agency. Therefore, the only way for Lin Yi to leave here was to go into the sea. Going into the sea was risky. If he was unlucky, he might encounter terrible sea beasts like the Ghost Ray. But compared to what Lin Yi had experienced in the past month, this was nothing at all. Without any hesitation, after a little estimation of the direction, Lin Yi directly wrapped his whole body with genuine chi and jumped into the vast sea. Although it was not realistic to swim directly back to Verdant Arc City, jumping into the sea was the first step to leave the South Island. Only after a certain distance could he have a chance to get a free ride. Others were scared to jump into the sea, but Lin Yi was very calm. As long as he didn't encounter any difficult sea beasts, with his ability he could stay in the sea for a month. As long as he didn't make a mistake in the direction, he could swim back to Verdant Arc City even if he swam in such a long time. From the time he'd been hunted by the West Mountain Elder to the time he'd mistakenly entered the Soul Beast Conference. Lin Yi's luck had been so bad that he couldn't even get a sip of water to get stuck between his teeth. But now that it had been a month, he wasn't as unlucky anymore. After swimming about 20 miles away from the South Island, Lin Yi found a passenger ship, and the destination was Verdant Arc City. After paying 100 spirit jades, he finally got a free ride. Returning to the Verdant Arc Pier and looking at the familiar scene in front of him, Lin Yi couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was really lucky to be able to come back alive this time. Now in retrospect, even Lin Yi himself felt a little strange. Being chased by the West Mountain sect, entering the Spirit Beast Convention by mistake, crossing the two major areas of the South Island, any one of which would have led to death, but Lin Yi managed to get through all of them. He didn't lose an arm or a leg. It was really sweet after suffering. Other than the fact that there were more people and the docks were busier than before, everything else in Velvet Arc City looked very normal. There weren't any obvious differences from before, and this was something that Lin Yi wasn't expecting. After all, as early as a month ago at the Spirit Beast Convention, Vermilion Bird had already publicly determined the strategy to levy taxes on the various cities in the South Continent Sea area, and even the selection of the city lord had been decided. He didn't expect that a month had passed and no action had been taken. But on second thought, at that time, the settling district was responsible for the Devil Leng Sea area, and the Vermilion Bird appointed the city lord of Devil Leng City. Maybe the Devil Leng City had already taken action, but it hadn't affected the Verdant Arc Sea area yet. In any case, this had little to do with Lin Yi. This was a matter between the Spirit Beast clan and the South Continent Sea area. If there was a large-scale conflict, it was definitely not something that could be solved by one or two people. Not to mention Lin Yi, even the strength of the West Mountain sect was far from enough. Chapter 45-34. They had to be at least as powerful as the entire West Mountain Evil sect in order to have the right to intervene in this matter. However, that was all they had. It was almost impossible for the ambitious Vermilion Bird to stop just like that. This kind of big event, which could easily affect the overall situation of the entire Heaven Stage Island, could only be handled by the big figures of the famous sects after the matter was blown up. With Lin Yi's current strength, he could barely protect himself. Of course, he couldn't get involved in this mess. It was the right thing to do to return to the North Island before it happened. Although everything was normal in the Wayark Sea area, Lin Yi didn't dare to act rashly. The training in the past month had made him much more vigilant. Unless he was sure that nothing would go wrong, he wouldn't appear in public in front of everyone. Even though Wayark City was far less dangerous than the South Island, Lin Yi still clearly remembered that West Mountain Old Sect clearly said that he would come to the Dragon Boat Escort Agency at the South Continent Escort Agency's conference. Before figuring out West Mountain Old Sect's movements, appearing rashly was tantamount to asking for trouble. Because of all the previous legendary deeds, Lin Yi could be regarded as a well-known celebrity in Wayark City. It was estimated that he would attract a large group of people if he stood in any corner. Fortunately, Lin Yi was now wearing the Thousand Silk Mask. In the eyes of ordinary people, he was just a vulgar person from the martial artist path. Naturally, he wouldn't attract attention. After entering the familiar Wayark City, Lin Yi didn't do anything for the whole day. He just found a restaurant, ate something and rested. At the same time, he pricked up his ears to listen to the discussions of other diners around him. This was also a kind of experience in Jianghu. If you wanted to know what had happened in a place recently, the best way was to sit in the local restaurant for a day. Basically, even the slightest movement of grass in the wind could be known clearly. As expected, almost all of the three most talked about things around him were directly or indirectly related to Lin Yi. One was the various legendary deeds of Lin Yi, and the second was the new hegemon of the South Continent's Equal Escort Agency. The third one was the evil cultivator giant, West Mountain Elder Sect, who was in charge of the Dragon Boat Escort Agency. The first two items were just for show, but the last one was extremely valuable to Lin Yi. It was fortunate that he didn't show his face to the public, otherwise once the news of his return got out, with the old sect's unrelenting attitude, they'd be the first to come after him. That'd be troublesome. Lin Yi waited in the restaurant until the sky turned dark before he left. Under the cover of the night, he made his way to the Equal Heaven Escort Agency. Initially, he wanted to enter the agency through the main entrance. However, when he saw a few vendors glancing at him from time to time, Lin Yi immediately gave up on the idea. Instead, he climbed over the wall in the backyard. This was not the night market in the secular world. After dark, there were basically no stalls on the street. After all, this place was chaotic during the day, and it was even more chaotic at night. Those who were not brave would not even dare to stay on the street, let alone set up a stall. At this time, there were only two kinds of vendors who would still stick to their posts. One was that they were really in need of spiritual jades, and the other was that they had ulterior motives. The few people opposite the Equal Heaven escort agency were not dressed shabbily. They did not seem to be in dire straits, and it was obvious that they were not in need of spiritual jades. It was obvious that they were the latter. In the entire Velvet Arc City, there was only one force that would be so sneaky as to keep an eye on the Equal Heaven escort agency. That was the Dragon Boat escort agency. Lin Yi was 80% sure that these spies were placed here to keep an eye on him. Once he appeared, the West Mountain Elder Sect would be the first to receive news. He had stayed in the Equal Heaven escort agency for a long time. Lin Yi was very familiar with the internal structure of the Equal Heaven escort agency. Although it was the overlord of the escort agencies in the South Continent Seas, the security of the Equal Heaven escort agency was much stronger than before. However, no matter how many people were on duty, they could not stop Lin Yi from sneaking in. After a month of intense training, the heavily guarded Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was practically defenseless to Lin Yi now. There wasn't even a shred of difficulty in the slightest. It was another day of socializing. Qi Wenhan rubbed his head as he staggered back to his room. He reeked of alcohol. He had no choice. Ever since he became the overlord of the South Continent's escort agency, there would be big customers coming to visit him every few days. As the young master of the escort agency, he naturally had to come out and entertain them. Drinking with them was something he couldn't refuse. I have to entertain customers again tomorrow. I have to accompany them all day long. Fuck, I used to be the young master of an escort agency, but now I've almost become a prostitute of the drunken flower brothel. Qi Wenhan sat on the edge of his bed in a daze. He smiled bitterly as he complained. In the past, he had dreamed of becoming the overlord of the escort agency. However, now that his dream had come true, he felt that it was no longer as easy as before. It looks like Brother Qi is very familiar with the drunken flower brothel. Come, have a cup of spirit tea to relieve your hangover. A figure had appeared at a table not far away from him. He smiled faintly at Qi Wenhan and poured a cup of tea for Qi Wenhan. At the same time, he poured a cup for himself and took a sip in satisfaction. He did not treat himself as an outsider at all. Sure, thanks a lot. Qi Wenhan subconsciously got up and walked toward the table. He only realized after walking halfway. His drunkenness instantly dissipated and turned into a cold sweat. As if facing a formidable enemy, he said warily, "Who's there?" Qi Wenhan immediately sobered up. He could not stop the lingering fear in his heart. He wanted to give himself 2 tight slaps. He did not even know that someone had entered his room. He must have drunk himself into a drunken stupor. Fortunately, the other party did not attack him immediately. Otherwise, even if he had 100 lives, his neck would have been sliced off. What? It's only been a month, and Brother Qi has already forgotten about me? That person turned around with a smile. It was none other than Lin Yi who had snuck in silently. However, this was not his original appearance, and he was still wearing the 1,000 silk mask. Brother Lin. Qi Wenhan was immediately overjoyed when he heard this voice. However, looking at this completely unfamiliar face in front of him, he was suddenly stunned. Looking at his incredulous eyes, it was obvious that he had already guessed Lin Yi's identity. He just did not dare to be 100% sure. Brother Qi need not be suspicious. It is indeed me, Lin. Lin Yi nodded with a smile. Ah, it really is you, Brother Ling? Only then did Qi Wenhan completely confirm Lin Yi's identity. Although his appearance had changed, his voice and figure had not changed. That was enough. It's been a month since we last met. Brother Qi, how have you been? Lin Yi nodded affirmatively. At the same time, he gave Qi Wenhan a look, indicating that he should not make too much noise. Chapter 45-38, How have you been? Chapter 45-35. Oh, I trust you've been well since we last met. Qi Wenhan looked at Lin Yi excitedly, unable to hide the ecstasy on his face. He suddenly hugged Lin Yi. and although he tried his best to keep his voice low, he could not help but exclaim, "I told you, Brother Ling, you're definitely fine." "Ha, this is great, this is great." Looking at Qi Wenhan's incoherent and excited expression, Lin Yi could not help but feel moved. He first joined the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency to find a place to stay. Rather than saying that he got along well with Qi Wenhan, it would be more accurate to say that it was because of benefits. However, after experiencing so many trials and tribulations, Lin Yi knew that he had not only gained an ally, but also a brother who treated him with sincerity. This was the most precious thing he had gained from this trip to the southern state. "Ah, I'm fine. I've made you worry." Lin Yi patted Qi Wenhan's shoulder and laughed. The two then sat opposite each other. Qi Wenhan was excited for a long time, and after a long time, he finally calmed down. Looking at Lin Yi's current appearance, he could not help but ask curiously, "Brother Ling, how did you suddenly become like this?" "In order to deceive people, I deliberately wore a mask. I heard that the West Mountain Elder is now in the Dragon Boat Escort Agency," Lin Yi said. "That's right. They've only been back for a few days. Although they've told everyone that Brother Ling has been buried on the South Island, they still haven't given up on their evil intentions. They've sent a lot of spies outside our escort agency, and I'm guessing that they're here for Brother Ling. It's a good thing that you're wearing a mask. These spies were very annoying. They basically monitored every movement of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency inside and out. However, Qi Mingyuan and he did not dare to say anything about it. If the other party was only the Dragon Boat Escort Agency, these spies would have been caught and killed long ago. However, the other party's backer was the West Mountain Elder. Even though the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's current status was like the sun in the sky, it still could not provoke the Mountain Opening Period Evil Cultivator. If they really provoked the other party into action, there was really no way. The old monster of Shishan Mountain didn't make things difficult for the escort agency, did he? Linus. There was nothing for him to worry about, but if the West Mountain Old Master took his anger out on the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, that would be a real problem. "Not yet," Qi Wenhan said confidently. "He just sent someone to keep an eye on us. He didn't do anything drastic. I think he's worried about the status of our escort agency. Normally, he wouldn't dare do anything to us." That's good." Lin Yi nodded. His reputation as the overlord of the South Continent Escort Agency was not for nothing. Even if the other party was a giant evil cultivator at the opening of the mountain, he would have to think twice before making a move. After all, this influence was not small. If he was not careful, he might attract the attack of the righteous path. As the two of them were talking, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside the room. Lin Yi and Qi Wenhan looked at each other and kept quiet at the same time. After all, this was a matter of life and death. The news of Lin Yi's return must not be leaked, even if he was wearing the 1,000 silk mask. He had to make sure that no one else noticed. The footsteps suddenly stopped at the door of the room. Then a familiar voice sounded, "Wenhan, you're not asleep yet, are you?" "It's my father." Qi Wenhan looked at Lin Yi and asked, "Brother Qi, do you want to see him?" "Of course. I can see the others, but how can I not see Chief Escort Qi?" Lin Yi smiled slightly. His whereabouts needed to be kept a secret from 99% of the people, but he could not leave without even seeing Qi Mingyuan. If that was the case, there would be no need for him to make a trip back to the escort agency. "Okay, I'll call him in." Qi Wenhan nodded excitedly and hurriedly went to open the door. He led Qi Mingyuan in. "Wenhan, I'm going to discuss the alliance with Zhao Shaning tomorrow, so I'll leave the family to you. Make arrangements for the representatives of the Chamber of Commerce. They're all rare customers." Qi Mingyuan was halfway through his sentence when his expression suddenly changed. Only then did he realize that there was a stranger in the room that he had never seen before. Qi Mingyuan couldn't help but stare at Qi Wenhan reproachfully. "Why didn't you say so earlier that there was an outsider in the room?" What he had just said was confidential and related to the entire South Continent Escort Agency alliance. If it was leaked in advance, it was very likely that there would be unexpected twists and turns, or even a premature death. "Father, this isn't an outsider." Qi Wenhan shrugged and didn't explain further. Not an outsider? Qi Mingyuan couldn't help but be stunned. He carefully looked up and down and felt that this person was vaguely familiar. However, he was sure that he had never seen this face before. As the chief escort of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency, his eyesight was far superior to that of ordinary people. He could only tentatively ask, "I wonder if you—" "Chief Escort, long time no see." Lin Yi smiled slightly. "You are?" Hearing this familiar voice, Qi Mingyuan was instantly stunned. He looked at Qi Wenhan beside him in disbelief. It wasn't until he saw Qi Wenhan nod in affirmation that he finally said with surprise and joy, "Young Hero Ling?" "That's right, it's me. I've troubled you all this time, Chief Escort." Lin Yi nodded with a smile. "You're too kind. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Young Hero Ling, it's a joyous occasion for you to be able to return safely. Even Qi Mingyuan, who had always been mature and steady, couldn't hide his excitement at this moment like Qi Wenhan. At the same time, he said with some embarrassment, "The Equal of Heaven Escort Agency's success today is all thanks to you, young Hero Ling. In comparison, we couldn't help it all. We feel ashamed to see you." "You're too kind, Chief Escort. I'll always remember everything the agency has done for me. There's no need to say anything unnecessary. We're on the same side after all." Lin Yi smiled as he glanced at Qi Wenhan beside him. His relationship with Qi Mingyuan could still be considered as a business-like alliance. However, as long as Qi Wenhan was around, he could always maintain his trust. At the end of the day, it was because of Qi Wenhan that Lin Yi was so close to the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. Compared to the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency, he valued Qi Wenhan more. Birds of a feather flocked together. After all, both of them were passionate people. Young Hero Ling is right. We're on the same side, so I won't waste any more words with young Hero Ling. Qi Mingyuan nodded repeatedly in agreement, and then said seriously, "Young Hero Ling's safe return is a great thing for our entire Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. However, the West Mountain Sect Master is currently at the Dragon Boat Escort Agency, so it's best that the news doesn't leak out. It's best that we avoid conflict for now." "You're right, Chief Escort. I was thinking the same thing. To tell you the truth, I've come back this time to bid farewell to the two of you," Lin Yi said. "Farewell?" The chief father and son were both shocked. Qi Wenhan hurriedly asked, "Brother Ling, could it be that you're leaving the southern lands?" Chapter 45-39, Farewell. Chapter 45-36. Yes, I came to South Continent this time to hunt down Wu Bao Liang, the evil cultivator. Now that the task has been completed and I've been out for more than half a year, it's time to return to the North Island, Lin Yi explained. Speaking of which, his experience in the past half a year in the South Continent could be said to be wonderful. Regardless of what he should or should not have experienced, Lin Yi went through all of them. His realm of strength skyrocketed from the early stage of the Gold Core realm to the present peak of the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. He caused a lot of life and death grudges, and at the same time he made a friend like Qi Wenhan. Now, it could be said that he had completed his mission and could retreat unscathed. That's true. Now Wei Arc City is guarded by the old devil of West Mountain Sect. It's really dangerous for you, Brother Ling. You can take shelter when you go back to the North Island. Qi Mingyuan pondered for a moment and nodded. Brother Ling, are you sure you can report back empty-handed? Qi Wenhan was a little worried. Normally, for this kind of wanted mission, you have to at least bring back a head, right? Only with a head could report back. This was an unwritten rule in many sect missions. After all, there was no proof. If Lin Yi went back empty-handed and said that he killed Wu Bao Liang, what if people didn't believe him? Qi Mingyuan couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Although Wu Bao Liang was killed by Lin Yi, his head was not cut off. That's easy to say. If I killed Wu Bao Liang in private, it's really hard to explain. But this time, he was killed in public in the arena of the South Continent's Escort Agency Grand Event, and everyone knows that I killed him. After I go back, let them investigate a little, and the truth will come to light. Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently. Now, with his status in the three major pavilions of the North Island, he was a person who was recognized by the Pavilion Master of Towering Pavilion, Shanghai Tianhua, in public, and the Pavilion Master of Blue Cloud Pavilion, Yu Jinyang, also looked up to him. Unless they had eaten the heart of a bear or the heart of a leopard, who would dare to make things difficult for Lin Yi in this kind of matter? That would be for the best. Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan both nodded. It's not convenient for me to make a public appearance this time, and I can't bid farewell to all of you in public. I'll have to trouble Chief Escort and Brother Qi to apologize on my behalf after I leave, Lin Yi requested. Well said, well said. Now that the situation is special, everyone can understand. Qi Mingyuan agreed. By the way, there's one more thing I'd like to trouble Brother Qi with. There are too many people at the Hong Chamber of Commerce. It's not convenient for me to bid farewell to Manager Chai, so I'd like to write a letter for Brother Qi to deliver on my behalf, Lin Yi said. No problem. It just so happens that I've invited shopkeeper Chai to accompany me for tomorrow's meal. It's no trouble at all. Leave it to me. Qi Wenhan patted his chest and nodded as he prepared a brush, ink, and paper for Lin. Lin Yi immediately took the pen and paper and started writing. There weren't any unnecessary pleasantries, just a few words of advice and comfort. It was enough to let honest Chai know that he and Hong Zhong were always paying attention to him. After writing in one breath, Lin Yi asked Qi Wenhan to put away the letter. He was about to leave when he suddenly remembered something. He immediately said to Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan, "This time at the South Island, I accidentally heard a piece of news. If nothing goes wrong, it will affect the situation of the entire South Continent. I think you need to be mentally prepared." Young Hero Ling, please speak. It was rare to see Lin Yi so serious. Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan's expressions instantly turned solemn. They secretly wondered what kind of news could affect the situation of the entire South Continent. According to the internal news of the Spirit Beast clan, they're already preparing to levy taxes on all human cultivators in the South Continent. As for when exactly it will start, it's still unknown. But it should happen sooner or later. So you better quickly discuss a strategy to avoid becoming cannon fodder, Lin Yi warned. This news was too shocking. Lin Yi didn't want to reveal it. However, he couldn't just stand by the side and watch the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Even if he couldn't be of much help, he could at least warn them. What? The Spirit Beast clan is going to levy taxes? Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan were instantly shocked. Their faces were full of shock, and they couldn't help but reveal a terrified expression. How could this be? There hasn't been such a precedent in the past thousands of years. There really hasn't been such a precedent in the past. However, the Spirit Beast clan's authority had just undergone a huge change not long ago. This proposal to levy taxes was brought up by the person who was in power at the Spirit Beast gathering. It can't be as simple as drawing a pie in the sky. They must be serious, Lin Yi explained. It's too shocking. Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan slumped into their spacious armchairs at the same time. It took them a long time to digest the shock and panic brought about by Lin Yi's news. In reality, if Lin Yi hadn't said this, they would never have believed that the Spirit Beast clan had the idea to levy taxes. Were they trying to provoke a war between humans and beasts? It was true that the native human cultivators of the South Continent Sea would never be able to fight against the insufferably powerful Spirit Beast clan head-on. However, this didn't stop them from asking for help from the human sects on the other Heaven Stage Islands. Due to the abundance of real estate in the South Continent Sea, especially as it was close to the South Island, which was a primeval land blessed by nature, almost every famous sect on the Heaven Stage Islands had set up a stronghold here. If the Spirit Beast clan really touched their interests and incurred the wrath of the masses, no matter how many powerful Spirit Beast experts they had, they wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand. Just the sum of the human forces that had suffered losses was enough to make the Spirit Beast clan suffer. Based on the difference in strength between the two sides, it was hard to say who would emerge victorious on the day of the war. Suddenly, Qi Mingyuan rose to his feet and bowed deeply to Lin Yi. He nodded in gratitude and said, "Young Hero Ling, you've saved our lives. If it weren't for your reminder, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency might have been the first unlucky souls to be targeted. On behalf of the entire agency, I thank you for saving our lives. This wasn't an alarmist statement. Unlike before, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was now the flag-bearer of escort agencies in the South Continent Sea. Their business was expanding at an extremely fast pace. Almost every day, new sea territories would be added to the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's business territory. In just over a month, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's escort ships frequently appeared in all the well-known sea territories of the South Continent. In this way, if the Spirit Beast Clan's experts were to make a move, no matter which sea territory was the first to levy taxes, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency would always be among the first to be taxed. If the Spirit Beast Clan was not mentally prepared and acted rashly, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, the Spirit Beast Clan was not as cautious as the West Mountain Elder sect. Before they acted, they would weigh the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's weight. In their eyes, the so-called overlord of the escort agencies of the South Continent was nothing more than dog's fart. If one dared to disobey them in the slightest, the Spirit Beast Clan would kill their entire family without a second thought. They could also make an example out of them, killing two birds with one stone. Chapter 4540, Shocking News. Chapter 4537. Regardless of how things developed in the future, it was foreseeable that a large number of people would die when the Spiritual Beast Clan began to collect taxes. After all, using blood to pave the way was the Spiritual Beast Clan's style of doing things. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency was originally on the list, but with Lin Yi's reminder, as long as they knew what was good for them and made preparations beforehand, they would still have a chance of survival. Since we're all on the same side, is there a need to be so polite? Lin Yi hurriedly helped Qi Mingyuan up. He purposely said this so that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency could pass the tax without any problems, not so that everyone would be grateful. Father, Brother Ling, should we quickly leak this information so that the others can be prepared? Otherwise, many people will die. Qi Wenhan still had a nervous expression on his face. Lin Yi glanced at Qi Mingyuan and did not say anything. He was only responsible for passing the information to the two of them, as well as Honest Chai. As for the lives of the others, it did not matter much to him. More importantly, if this information were to spread, it would not necessarily be a good thing. No, unless the Spiritual Beast Clan really starts to move. Otherwise, if we leak this information from our mouths, we will definitely become the target of everyone. The Spiritual Beast Clan will look for us first, and that is a price we cannot afford to pay. Qi Mingyuan shook his head decisively. This, all right. Although Qi Wenhan was hot-blooded, he was not a brainless person. After thinking through the pros and cons, he did not dwell on this matter anymore. After all, no matter what it was, it could not be more important than the lives of his own Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Wenhan, remember this. Young swordsman Ling's information must be kept strictly confidential. Not even the slightest bit of it can be leaked out, even to our own people. I will make secret arrangements for what to do next. You just have to act as if this matter never happened, understand? Qi Mingyuan was still a little worried as he reminded Wenhan. This matter was very important. This matter had to be prepared early. More importantly, it had to be kept strictly confidential. If even the slightest bit of information was leaked, it would be a disaster for the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. Of course, Qi Mingyuan was fine with it. What he was afraid of was that his son would do something stupid for the sake of his so-called loyalty. The consequences would be unimaginable. Father, don't worry. I know what's important. I won't joke around with the lives of so many people in our escort agency. Qi Wenhan nodded in a low voice. However, he would not be careless when it came to such an important matter. Otherwise, he would not be qualified to take over the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. Lin Yi said upon seeing this. He had said his goodbyes and warned them. Staying at the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency was unnecessary. Furthermore, there were so many spies from the Dragon Boat Escort Agency outside. To him, this place had become a troublesome place. It was not as safe as the outside world. Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan looked at each other. Both of them wanted Lin Yi to stay for a few more days. They wanted to take this opportunity to properly thank this great hero and then send him off in style. However, their current conditions did not allow it. Doing something unnecessary would only ruin things, so they did not dare to make him stay. Now that the situation is special, we don't dare to keep you. We're on the same side, so let's not be so formal. However, young hero Ling, you must remember that you will always be a part of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. If there's anything you need, as long as you give us a word, whether it's a mountain of swords or a wok of boiling oil, we'll do anything for you. Qi Mingyuan said solemnly. That's right. The escort agency's current foundation was built by you, Brother Ling. There's nothing much to say about us brothers. We'll share blessings and misfortunes together. If you have to shoulder everything alone, that's not very loyal, Qi Wenhan said seriously. Don't worry. If there's a need, I won't stand on ceremony with you. Lin Yi smiled and nodded. He could not help but feel a surge of warmth in his heart. The Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's current strength was naturally nothing compared to the 5 great islands of the Heaven rank. However, it was still one of the overlords of the South Continent seas, especially now that its strength had skyrocketed. If it could smoothly survive the upcoming calamity, it definitely wouldn't be looked down upon in the future. This was a force that couldn't be underestimated, and it might come in handy in the future. After bidding farewell to Qi Mingyuan and Qi Wenhan, Lin Yi immediately climbed over the wall and escaped under the cover of the night. He avoided the many spies of the Dragon Boat Escort Agency and found a remote inn to stay. However, he did not stay in the inn for long. In less than 6 hours, he left the inn when the sky outside began to brighten. He immediately went straight to the Crescent Pier. Of course, it was impossible to return to the North Island by sea. Not to mention the fact that there was no direct route to the North Island. Even if there was, it would probably take at least half a year at sea. Lin Yi did not have that much free time. Therefore, there was only one way to return to the North Island, and that was to ride a flying spirit beast. Coincidentally, Huang Xiaotao's large spirit bird was being kept here. When the Morning Star Academy came to Crescent City to select disciples, Huang Xiaotao could have taken the spirit bird with her. After all, it was a loyal companion that she had relied on for many years. However, in order to make things easier for Lin Yi, she eventually left it behind. Still wearing the Thousand Silk Mask, Lin Yi did not attract any special attention during the entire process of receiving the spirit bird. Only the servant who received him looked at him in surprise. This was because in the previous records, the owner of the spirit bird was a woman with the surname Huang, and it was said that she had a close relationship with the famous Ling Yi. However, the person in front of him was a crude country bumpkin, completely different from the norm. However, despite the doubts in his heart, the servant did not ask too many questions. For a small character like him with low strength to survive in the waters of the South Continent, he had to keep his mouth shut. Otherwise, with the atmosphere of killing people on the streets, it was easy for trouble to come from a loose tongue. Anyway, this bumpkin had a special number plate on him, and he had paid enough fees for the period of time. The servant quickly led Lin Yi to the side of the spirit bird. Spirit beasts were extremely intelligent. Although this spirit bird was not the one that Lin Yi had tamed, it was still very enthusiastic and excited to see Lin Yi again after such a long time. Of course, it knew that Lin Yi was its male owner. Moreover, before Huang Xiaotao left, she had secretly come to see it and told it to listen to Lin Yi's instructions. Chapter 45-38. I'm sorry to have wronged you these days. I'll reward you well when I go back. Lin Yi stroked the spirit bird's neck happily. The nursing station wouldn't embezzle the spirit beast's food, but that was all. Spirit beasts, like humans, needed companionship and communication. After returning to the North Island, Lin Yi had to spend more time on this spirit bird. Otherwise, how could he repay Huang Xiaotao's kindness? The spirit bird responded clearly, bending its head and rubbing against Lin Yi intimately. It seemed that it was very satisfied with its male master. Lin Yi smiled slightly and then jumped onto the spirit bird's back. After a loud cry, the spirit bird spread its wings and flapped them slightly. Immediately, It rose quickly and steadily into the air. It was true that the spirit bird was a flying spirit beast made for human cultivators. Feeling the whistling wind in his ears and looking at the rising red sun in the distance, Lin Yi was in a good mood. After being out for so long, he was finally going back. The spirit bird was very intelligent. It could clearly remember any route it flew over once. Therefore, this time, Lin didn't even need to point the way. The spirit bird could find the way back to the North Island by itself, and it was more accurate and reliable than Lin. Therefore, he only needed to sit on the back of the spirit bird and practice. Lin Yi stretched comfortably on the back of the spirit bird. When he was about to sit down and practice, the jade pendant suddenly sounded a warning. Even the spirit bird seemed to sense some danger and became very panicked. Lin Yi's heart suddenly tightened. He quickly looked around vigilantly. What's going on? Why, Lin Yi Jr., you really didn't die? A cloud of black fog appeared behind him out of thin air. At the same time, it was accompanied by the West Mountain Patriarch's sneer and exclamation with some disbelief. Even I was covered in dust and almost died in that damn place. With your insignificant strength, you were able to escape. How lucky are you? Looking at the West Mountain Patriarch who was gradually becoming visible in the black fog, Lin Yi was so shocked that his heart skipped a beat. His expression changed. The reason why he had been so cautious on his return this time, even going to the Equal Heaven Escort Agency in the middle of the night without showing his face, was to guard against this West Mountain old sect master. Who would have thought that he would still end up like this? How did this guy know about him? However, Lin Yi quickly understood. Not only did the Dragon Boat Escort Agency have spies around the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency, but they also had spies at the docks. Perhaps even the manservants at the Spirit Beast Nursing Station were their people. Lin Yi's actions could not be said to be careless, but there was a hurdle that he could not bypass. He had to retrieve the spirit bird that Huang Xiaotao had placed here. This was the only flaw, and it was also a fatal flaw. Once he took Huang Xiaotao's spirit bird, it would be useless even if he changed his appearance. People could easily guess his identity just by looking at him riding on the spirit bird. The West Mountain Old Sect Master received the news. Naturally, he would rush over immediately like now. He was too careless. Lin Yi secretly regretted it, but he really had no choice. Even if it was to avoid the West Mountain Old Sect Master, he couldn't just give up Huang Xiaotao's spirit bird, right? If it wasn't for someone informing me, I wouldn't have been able to recognize you if you had changed into such a vulgar appearance. However, looking at your current performance, you're undoubtedly Lin Yi. This is really the will of the heavens helping me. Jia. The West Mountain Old Sect Master sneered complacently. He now hated Lin Yi to the core. This was not only related to the death of his two disciples, Wu Bao Liang and Cheng Haonan, but also not just to refine the trump card puppet. It was also for his own face. The last time he chased after Lin Yi under the watchful eyes of the public, he did not expect to be defeated. Lin Yi could neither kill him nor catch him. Instead, he was embarrassed in the South Island. How could he, a dignified evil cultivator tycoon of the opening period, endure this? As a tycoon of evil cultivators, to be honest, West Mountain Old Sect Master did not care much about his disciples being killed. Anyway, he had always regarded human life as grass. If a disciple died, he could take another disciple. It was no big deal. But at his level, he could never lose his face no matter what the occasion was. Otherwise, he would not only be laughed at, but it would also greatly affect his deterrent power. If a tycoon of evil cultivators could not scare people and control the situation, what was the point of showing up? The sudden appearance of West Mountain Old Sect Master made Lin Yi, who was in a good mood, feel as if a bucket of ice water was poured on his head. But fortunately, his nerves were tough. After seeing West Mountain Old Sect Master, although he was inevitably stunned, he quickly reacted and hurriedly drove the spirit bird to escape. The flying speed of the spirit bird was extremely fast. It was first class among all flying spirit beasts. In terms of absolute speed, it was at least comparable to Lin Yi's extreme butterfly microsteps on the ground. Although West Mountain Old Sect Master seemed to be able to fly, Compared with real flying spirit beasts, he could only be regarded as floating at most. His speed in the air was certainly not comparable with the spirit bird. It was a pity that West Mountain Old Sect Master didn't need to be very fast to chase people. As long as his divine awareness locked on Lin Yi's position like last time, he could directly catch up with him in an instant. This kind of amazing skill couldn't be gotten rid of by speed alone. One of the key reasons why he could escape last time was that Lin Yi was covered with swamp mud, which successfully isolated him from the West Mountain Old Sect Master's divine awareness. That was why he could escape with the help of the ghost. Otherwise, no matter how fast he was, no matter how hard he tried to use the extreme butterfly microsteps, it would be useless. During the month in the South Island, Lin Yi collected some swamp mud with the same effect in the space of the jade pendant. But now he was in a hurry, and it was impossible for West Mountain Old Sect Master to give him the chance to apply swamp mud on his body. Besides, it was useless to apply swamp mud on himself. West Mountain Old Sect Master only needed to lock on his spirit bird. What was worse was that today happened to be a good day. Originally, the sea fog could more or less obstruct the West Mountain Old Sect Master's divine awareness. But now it was a rare clear sky. Even if there was no divine awareness, he could see Lin Yi with his eyes. Don't be afraid. Run in the direction of the 5-poison swamp. The ghost's voice sounded in his mind at the right time. Okay. Lin immediately nodded decisively. It seemed that he could only use the same trick again. He escaped to the South Island like last time and scared the old devil away. Looking at all the surrounding places, perhaps only those spirit beasts in the South Island could make West Mountain Old Sect Master flinch. Chapter 45-39. With a sneer, the West Mountain Elder's signature black mist appeared above Lin Yi's head like a shadow, but this time, he wouldn't use the soul hook hand. A horrifying bone claw reached out from the black mist. It wasn't a human, but it wasn't a beast. It looked like it was made out of human and beast bones, and the killing intent it exuded was something Lin Yi had never seen before in his life. Bang! With a horrifying whistling sound, the bone claw instantly streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. With lightning speed, it went straight for Lin Yi's head, vowing to crush him with one claw. Before the bone claw arrived, the terrifying killing intent it exuded was already too much for Lin Yi to bear. The spirit bird he was sitting on could not even move its wings as it fell straight down. Explode! Fortunately, Lin Yi was already prepared for this. At the critical moment, he hurriedly condensed a super bomb in his hand. It just happened to meet the ferocious bone claw above his head. Boom! A loud noise suddenly resounded through the entire Wei Arc Sea. Tsunamis suddenly rose and the weather changed. Everyone in Wei Arc City showed a look of horror at the same time. Those people in Deviling City were already familiar with this destructive sound, but it was the first time they experienced it. At the edge of the air wave, the spirit bird rushed out with Lin Yi, desperately flapping its wings to escape. At the moment at the center of the explosion, although the bone claw was caught off guard and suffered a fierce blow, it only paused for a moment. It was not damaged at all. Jie Jie, with this little strength, you want to plot against me? What a fantasy! West Mountain Old Master sneered as he retracted the bone claw. Lin Yi's super bomb was enough to kill a high-level nascent soul stage master. Even if a profound ascending stage master was caught off guard, he would still have a long way to go if he wanted to deal with West Mountain Old Master. Listening to the laughter of West Mountain Old Master behind him, Lin Yi's heart could not help but tremble. Although the time he condensed this time was very short, the super bomb was after all his last trump card. Even the violent fire thousand bursts fist did not have such power. But even so, there was nothing they could do to the West Mountain Old Master. Lin Yi's timing just now could not be said to be bad, but his strongest killing move still could not hurt his opponent at all. He only barely interrupted his opponent's attack, and that was all. The disparity between the two of them was really despairing and speechless. Hurry up and run. If that crooked path catches up to you before we reach the 5-poison swamp, you're dead for sure. The ghostly thing urged in his mind. Needless to say, Lin Yi shook his head with a bitter smile. He would run to the South Island desperately even if the ghost didn't urge him. Besides, this time was much more dangerous than last time. Last time, the West Mountain Elder Master wanted to refine him into a trump card puppet and didn't dare to hurt his body easily. But this time, he didn't have such scruples. He used a killing move from the get-go. The super bomb could barely block it once, but it definitely couldn't block it a second time. However, knowing that the other party could use their divine sense to lock onto them and follow them like a shadow, how was it possible to rely on the speed of the spirit bird to get rid of the other party? Don't worry, as long as you can get rid of that crooked path with absolute speed, you don't have to worry about his sudden arrival. He can't use his divine sense to lock onto you anymore. The ghostly thing suddenly laughed. But I didn't use the swamp mud? Lin Yi was stunned. I'm here, you don't need to use the swamp mud. The ghostly thing said angrily. Although the West Mountain Old Master was arrogant, if he was at his peak, he was just a good-for-nothing in front of the former Azure Dragon. In front of the former Azure Dragon, he was nothing more than a piece of trash. Even though he had fallen to such a miserable state, it was still a piece of cake for him to stop the other party's divine sense from locking onto him. Lin Yi just remembered that the ghostly thing was a primordial spirit grandmaster. In terms of the use of divine sense, he was at least 10 streets ahead of the West Mountain Old Master. But then he smiled bitterly and said, "If you knew this, why didn't you make a move last time? I thought I was dead for sure several times." Last time, this guy didn't directly use a killing move. Why would I make a move rashly? The ghostly thing curled its lips disapprovingly and said, "Boy, you have to remember, every time I make a move, there will be an increased risk of being seen through by others. Once people know that I'm on you, then the two of us will really not have a good life anymore." I remember. Lin Yi nodded in a deep voice, and immediately did not say anything more. He urged the spirit bird to fly quickly to the 5-poison swamp. At the same time, the West Mountain Old Master, who was shrouded in the black mist, laughed grimly. He habitually wanted to descend on the top of Lin Yi's head, but after a while, he found that he didn't even move a fart at all. He was still suspended in the original position. The West Mountain Old Master frowned and subconsciously wanted to redetermine the position of Lin Yi, but then his face suddenly changed. Lin Yi had actually disappeared from his divine sense. Not only that, even the spirit bird had disappeared with him. Wasn't this the same as seeing a ghost? In such good weather, not to mention within a radius of 5 miles, even a blade of grass and a tree within a radius of 100 miles could not escape the West Mountain Old Master's divine sense. But for some reason, the breath of Lin Yi and the spirit bird had indeed disappeared. This strange and evil feeling seemed to have been erased out of thin air by some kind of exquisite method. Such a method was something that even the West Mountain Old Sect Master had to admit was absolutely impossible to achieve. It was simply incredible. "Why, yeah, Ling Chen, don't think that you can escape like this. Today I will kill you." The West Mountain Old Master suddenly flew into a rage, but he quickly calmed down. His eyes focused and he looked into the distance. Then, the black mist suddenly shot out a powerful stream of vital energy, and his whole body shot out like an arrow toward the direction in which Lin Yi had escaped. After all, he was a great evil cultivator of the mountain opening period. If the West Mountain Old Master really burst out with speed, it would be no small matter. Especially now that he was consuming vital energy without caring about the cost, his flying speed was even faster than the spirit bird. Seeing the black dot behind him getting closer and closer, Lin Yi, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, was once again faced with a great enemy. He had already overestimated the strength of the West Mountain Old Master, but he didn't expect the other party to be able to catch up with him. He flew even faster than the spirit bird. Was this guy even human? Faster, faster. At this time, Lin Yi pinned all his hopes of survival on the spirit bird. Now that the ghost thing had made it impossible for the other party to follow him like a shadow, if he still couldn't escape, then he could only say that this was his fate. Chapter 4540. Senior, are we going to enter the forest of the South Island from the previous transmitting formation? Or are we going to fly there directly? Lin Yi asked quickly. It took some time to prepare to start the transmitting formation, and the Elder of West Mountain was likely to catch up with them. However, if they flew there directly, they would be easily targeted by nearby spirit beasts. No matter what choice they made, they had to take the risk in order to survive. That transmitting formation is a one-way transmitting formation. You can only go out but not in, the ghost answered. What? Damn it. How can I escape to the South Island? Senior, you're kidding me. I'm going to die. Lin Yi was shocked. This was the only way to get rid of the Elder of West Mountain in his eyes. How could it be a one-way transmitting formation? As for the other option of flying directly into the forest of the South Island, it was not feasible at all in his opinion. First, it was impossible to avoid those extremely dangerous spirit beasts. Second, even if there was a way to avoid them, they could not get rid of the Elder of West Mountain, who was faster than them. Wrong. Who told you that we flew here to enter the South Island? Do you think the South Island is your backyard, and you can enter whenever you want? Have you forgotten the pain you suffered before? The ghost smiled calmly and curled its lips. But what should I do if I don't enter the South Island? Are you going to scare the old monster away like last time? Lin Yi's eyes lit up, but then he denied it. No, this kind of thing can't be done again. The Elder of West Mountain is not a fool. How can he be fooled twice in a row? Of course, although he is a crooked person, he is not a retarded child. How can he be fooled twice in such a short time? If even the second in command is this kind of person, the West Mountain crooked sect would have been wiped out long ago. The ghost said, "Retarded child." Lin Yi could not help complaining in his heart. It seemed that this trip to the secular world was not in vain. Not only did it end up in such a miserable situation, but it also learned modern vocabulary. The reason why I let you escape here is not to let you escape to the South Island, nor to bluff to scare away this crooked Taoist. But there's something here that can save your life. I'm sure this monster of West Mountain can't do anything about it. Seeing the Elder of West Mountain getting closer and closer, the ghost was confident and did not panic at all. Even West Mountain Old Master can't do anything about it? Could it be that your friend is here? Lin Yi's spirit was suddenly refreshed. If it was before, he might not believe that there was a spirit beast that could stop a giant evil cultivator at the mountain opening period, but after seeing the scene at the Spirit Beast Convention last time, he had already seen the powerful foundation of the Spirit Beast clan. With the level of this ghost, if it really found a friend, it should not be a problem to deal with the West Mountain Elder. No, I don't have many friends. Even if I did, they are not in the South Island now. The ghostly thing's reply caused Lin Yi's heart to sink, and the next sentence shocked Lin even more. If you want to escape the pursuit of that crooked path, you must enter the 5 Poison Swamp. What? Senior, didn't you say that the 5 Poison Swamp's 5 elements kill each other? No matter who enters, they will die without a doubt? Lin Yi said in shock. That's right. That's why you have to use all of your true chi to protect yourself and this spirit bird as much as possible. You just have to fly all the way down. The ghostly thing pointed out. That works too? Won't I die without a doubt? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised and suspicious. When talking about the 5 Poison Swamp before, even the ghostly thing had a lingering fear in its tone, and vowed that even the old master of West Mountain was helpless. But now it asked him to jump down with the spirit bird. Wasn't it courting death? If he had known that he would die anyway, he might as well stay and fight with the old master of West Mountain. Why did he deliberately escape here and choose such a strange grave for himself? It was really superfluous. It was better to be buried in the sea, at least it would be cleaner. You can rest assured about this. If it were someone else, they would die without a doubt, but you, boy, probably won't die. The ghostly thing laughed. Senior, don't joke. If this 5 Poison Swamp can make a giant evil cultivator at the opening period helpless, how can I have the ability to jump down and not die? Lin Yi said with a wry smile. He had always been very confident, but he would never be overconfident. This kind of thing was unrealistic no matter how he thought about it. If you die, I will inevitably be unlucky. Do you think I will joke about this kind of thing? Although the ghostly thing didn't have a physical form, its tone showed what was called curling its lips. When the Heaven Stage Island was opened, you didn't even die under the pressure of the 5 elements attack. What's more, you are now at the peak of the middle stage of Gold Core Realm. Your strength is no longer what it used to be. How can you die in this trivial 5 poison swamp? Yes. Lin Yi's eyes suddenly lit up. The horror of the 5 poison swamp was the killing of the 5 elements. The 5 elements of heaven and earth circulated endlessly. Even the strongest master couldn't bear it, but he was different. He had the attribute of the 5 elements. Why would he be afraid of the 5 elements attack? Seeing that the old master of West Mountain was already in front of him, the ferocious bone claw in the black fog appeared again, and the dense evil chi, which was almost substantial, was overwhelming. Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate a little. He quickly followed the ghostly thing's instructions and used his genuine chi to protect himself and the spirit bird. Without saying anything, he rushed into the 5 poison swamp. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Watching Lin Yi and the spirit bird sink into the 5 poison swamp in an instant, leaving only a series of terrible bubbles, the old master of West Mountain was dumbfounded. He had been chasing too fast and too fiercely all the way. He almost didn't have time to stop and rushed into the swamp. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he used all his genuine chi to barely stop his body. However, the old master of West Mountain was lucky to not fall into the 5 poison swamp. The ferocious bone claw that he had condensed did not stop in time. It was almost close to Lin Yi's back and the claw went in. An ear-piercing sound instantly tore through the sky and broke the silence in an area of a few hundred kilometers. At the same time, the 5-colored mud that was soaked in the bone claw suddenly exploded, and the great power contained within it actually caused the entire world to pale in comparison. The bone claw, which had not been damaged in the face of Lin Yi's super bomb before, just after coming into contact with the mud, broke into pieces like broken rock weathering. Then, it was swallowed by the 5 poison swamp below, not even leaving a trace of bone residue. The old master of West Mountain suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This was a sign that he had suffered a serious backlash. The ferocious bone claw was a killing weapon that he had spent countless efforts to condense. It was absolutely indestructible, and its strength was no less than any divine weapon. Lin Yi's super bomb was a good proof. R1152. Chapter 45-41. This was one of the trump cards of the West Mountain sect's evil cultivators. However, before this extremely ugly 5 poison swamp, it collapsed upon contact and was completely unable to withstand a single blow. Such a horrifying scene, even the West Mountain old master couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. His originally strange face suddenly became pale without any color, and his heart was extremely frightened. Novel, this is the legendary 5 poison swamp. The West Mountain elder hurriedly flew into the air with a lingering fear in his heart, and only stopped after retreating for a few miles. He was afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of the bone claw and be swallowed by this ugly swamp without leaving a trace. Because very few human cultivators came to this place, there were not many people in the South Continent Sea who knew about the 5 poison swamp. However, the West Mountain Old Master was obviously a master who knew his stuff. Even if he didn't recognize it at first glance, if he still couldn't react after suffering such a big loss, then he would really be unworthy of his title as a big evil cultivator. After all, masters at the level of the West Mountain Old Master were often people who cherished their lives. They could be unfamiliar with any place or environment, but they must be familiar with those things that could pose a fatal threat to them. Just like the 5 poison swamp in front of them. Cultivators kept saying that they could go against the heavens and change their fate, but in fact, the higher the level, the more they were in awe of the power of heaven and earth. Because the stronger they were, the more they knew how small they were, and the more they knew the vastness and terror of heaven and earth. Fighting against the power of heaven and earth with the power of one person was a realm that many people dreamed of. Unfortunately, this would always be a beautiful fantasy. In fact, such a possibility would never exist. Any place that showed the power of heaven and earth was an absolutely dangerous and forbidden place for cultivators. No matter how strong one was, whether it was the mysterious ascending stage, the mountain opening stage, or even stronger, it was useless. If one wanted to go against the heavens in these places, there would always be one end, and that was death. No matter from which point of view, the 5-poison swamp in front of them completely met the definition of a dangerous place. Not to mention that the West Mountain Old Master had accidentally been cheated until his face was bleeding. Even if he had successfully stopped the bone claw just now, he would absolutely not dare to go near the 5-poison swamp. Why, Sinister Jr., before you die, you actually want to drag this sect down with you. Truly vicious to the extreme. The West Mountain Elder finally managed to heave a sigh of relief from his internal injuries. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and cursed. In his opinion, Lin Yi must have known that he was going to die, so he wanted to drag him down with him. At this moment, the West Mountain Elder's heart was filled with shock and fear. He sighed in his heart. Fortunately, he was careful enough and stopped in time. That was why he was lucky enough to escape. Otherwise, if he had really rushed in with Lin Yi without hesitation, it would have been useless no matter how strong he was. Even his indestructible bone claws could not withstand the 5 elements' attack, let alone his own flesh and blood body. At that time, he would definitely die together with this little bastard. Moreover, his body would be smashed into pieces and his soul would scatter. He would be deader than dead. A few miles away, the West Mountain Elder looked at the 5-poison swamp in front of him with a changing expression. He knew that this time, Lin Yi would not be able to come out alive. After all, this was different from the last time. Although the South Island Forest was also extremely dangerous, if one was extremely lucky, there would be a chance of survival in the end. However, once one fell into the 5-poison swamp in front of him, death was not a matter of probability, but a matter of certainty. There could not be any accidents, unless the world had gone mad. But death cannot wipe out all his crimes. He deserves to die without a corpse. The West Mountain Elder spat at the place where Lin Yi fell. Although he did not kill Lin Yi with his own hands, he died anyway. This time, his goal was finally achieved, and he did not end up with a dirty face like last time. The only thing that made the West Mountain Elder feel a little regretful was that Lin Yi did not even leave a bone residue, let alone a complete corpse. It was rare to encounter a good material that might be used to refine a trump card puppet, but he missed it. It would be a lie to say that it was not a pity. It could only be said that it was God's will. Although this place was very remote, it was the territory of the South Island after all. After the last bloody lesson, the old master of West Mountain did not dare to stay here for a long time, for fear of attracting the attention of some powerful spirit beasts. After cursing, he immediately turned around and left. The West Mountain Elder would never have thought that Lin Yi, who he thought must have died without a corpse, not only did he not die under the 5 elements attack of the swamp, but also had no injuries on his body. Not only that, but even the spirit bird was the same. His whole body was tightly protected with genuine qi. Since entering the 5-poison swamp, Lin Yi and the spirit bird had been falling rapidly. This process lasted for a long time, and it felt like the bottom could not be seen. Although this process was long and boring, it was not easy at all. The extremely strong 5 elements killing intent was hovering in all directions. Even though Lin Yi was wrapped in his genuine qi, he could clearly feel it. Thinking of the scene where the West Mountain Elder's bone claw was easily strangled by the 5 elements killing intent, the horror of the scene in front of him was really chilling. If it were other people, including the West Mountain Elder, who was an evil cultivator at the opening period, they would have already turned into a pile of powder in Lin Yi's current position. However, Lin Yi was surprised to find that although these terrible 5 elements killing intent had been hovering around from beginning to end, they did not mean to attack him at all. This feeling was that the surrounding 5 elements killing intent seemed to be immune to the genuine qi around him and the spirit bird. Such a strange situation, Lin Yi thought about it and understood. It was probably because of the 5 elements attribute that his genuine qi naturally carried the 5 elements attribute. Maybe he was mistaken by the 5 elements killing intent in the 5 poison swamp as the same kind. This was the only possible explanation. After all, the strength difference was more than 1,000 times. If he was not mistaken as the same kind, with the strength of Lin Yi's genuine qi, it was tantamount to a fool's dream to block the attack of these 5 elements killing intent. As he sank deeper and deeper, Lin Yi clearly felt that the 5 elements killing intent in all directions was getting heavier and heavier. The quantity was not as heterogeneous as at the beginning, but the strength was not the same as before. Logically speaking, the 5 elements killing intent should be the same as genuine qi, invisible and formless. However, the 5 elements murderous qi in front of him had already become a tangible existence. Each of them was like a rapidly swimming 5-colored flood dragon. Half of them were illusory while the other half were real. The terrifying pressure that they emitted was even more terrifying than the pressure that he had experienced in the spiritual beast convention. R1152. Chapter 45-42. What is this? Is this the murderous aura of the 5 elements or some kind of spirit beast? This time, even Lin Yi was somewhat stunned. From the secular world to the Heaven Stage Island, he believed that he had seen a lot of things, but he never knew that a kind of natural existence similar to the spiritual qi of heaven and earth could be so similar to a spiritual creature. Legend has it that when any kind of natural force is strong to a certain extent, it can give birth to a spiritual nature and then become a unique life form. Therefore, it is not wrong to say that they are spirit beasts, but they are only like spirit beasts. They have not been able to transform into real spirit beasts. The ghostly thing explained in a deliberately calm tone, but at the same time, there was also an inexplicable feeling of shock. Although he was the former Azure Dragon Elder of the Spirit Beast clan, it was his first time entering the 5 poison swamp, especially in such a deep place. Naturally, it was also his first time seeing such a powerful murderous aura of the 5 elements. Too amazing! Lin Yi couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He hadn't felt anything before, but now that he had seen it? Wrong? After seeing these flood dragon-like murderous auras of the 5 elements, he suddenly felt that this was not a place that could be casually entered, including human cultivators and spirit beasts, no matter how strong they were. The power of any one of the 5 elements' murderous auras here was at least comparable to that of a spirit beast guard, or even stronger. Even a heaven-defying existence might be able to withstand 1 or 2 of these murderous auras, but what about hundreds or thousands of them? There were more than tens of thousands of the 5 elements' murderous auras here. How could he resist them? The reason that Lin Yi could not be attacked here was purely because of his unique 5 elements attribute, which deceived these flood dragons formed from the 5 elements' murderous auras, causing them to mistakenly think that he was one of their kind, so that he could barely escape the calamity. But looking at the whole world, how many people were born with the 5 elements attribute? Other than Lin Yi himself, there wouldn't be a second person like him. Boy, you don't need to be too shocked. With your growth speed, I believe that you will reach their level in a few years. No, it should be said that you can reach their level with just a single wisp of your true qi. 5 elements and 7 attributes. With your aptitude, you are destined to have a bright future. There was a hint of excitement in the ghostly thing's voice. As the former Azure Dragon, there was basically nothing in this world that could make him lose his composure. However, Lin Yi's talent was truly unprecedented, especially his astonishing performance of getting stronger and stronger against strong opponents. Even the ghostly thing could not help but be dumbfounded and overwhelmed with emotions when he thought about it. In time, he had no doubt that Lin Yi would grow to an unprecedented level. He could summon clouds with a flip of his hand, and rain with a flip of his hand. At that time, nothing would be able to stop him. The king of spiritual beasts had always been an unsurpassable pinnacle in the ghostly creature's mind. However, after spending so much time with Lin Yi, this notion had quietly collapsed. With Lin Yi's heaven-defying talent and luck, the ghostly creature believed that one day he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the invincible king of spiritual beasts, or even surpass it. What? Any wisp of true qi can reach their level? Lin Yi did not think as much as the ghostly creature, but when he heard this, he was completely shocked. Just thinking about it made his blood boil to the point that he could not control himself. They are the 5 elements killing aura, and yours is the 5 elements true qi. In essence, they are actually the same. As long as you are strong enough, nothing is impossible. The ghostly creature paused for a moment, then immediately smiled and said, "Of course, the current you is still too weak. All your true qi combined is not even comparable to a strand of their hair. Don't think too much about it." Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at the half-real and half-illusory flood dragons, and could not help but curse in his heart. Did these things have hair? He did not know how long it had been. He only knew that as he continued to sink, Lin Yi suddenly felt that his surroundings were empty. This feeling did not feel like he was falling through the swamp at all. Instead, it felt like he was falling from the sky, and the speed of his descent suddenly increased by a large margin. Then, with a muffled bang, his feet actually landed on solid ground. Fortunately, Lin Yi had been using true qi to cover himself and the spirit bird. Otherwise, he would have been caught off guard and would have been injured. Fortunately, it seems that the ancient records about the 5 poison swamp are true. "Boy, you can withdraw your true qi now," the ghostly creature said. "That's it." Lin Yi could not help but feel a little surprised. At the same time, he raised his head and looked around. This was an extremely empty underground space, and about 100 feet above his head, there was a mottled, colorful scene. In addition to the swamp mud everywhere, he could clearly see the solid 5 elements murderous aura constantly hovering above. However, what made Lin Yi feel strange was that whether it was the swamp mud or the murderous aura of the 5 elements, they seemed to be blocked by an invisible layer of cover. This scene made Lin Yi unconsciously think of the large aquariums in the secular world, and it was quite unreal and dreamy. "It's fine." According to the ancient records I read before, this should be the source space of the 5 poison swamp. Not only is it absolutely safe, but there are also unexpected benefits. As the ghostly creature explained, it tried to use its divine sense to scan the surroundings. Unexpected benefits? Lin Yi was slightly stunned when he heard this. Without waiting for the ghostly creature to give him a hint, he immediately reacted. The density of the spiritual qi in this place was simply unprecedented. In fact, as early as the last time he passed through the 5 poison swamp, Lin Yi already knew that the spiritual qi in this place was dense, but he did not pay much attention to it at that time. After all, the spiritual qi he saw at that time was only much denser than other places on the Heaven Stage Island. Compared to the space in the Jade Pendant that Lin Yi had always relied on, it was still a lot worse. But this time was different. The density of the spiritual qi in the space below was more than 100 times denser than above. Lin Yi even found that the spiritual qi here could actually cover his space in the Jade Pendant. It was incredible that there was such a unique treasure land in the world. If he had not experienced it himself, Lin Yi would not even dare to believe that there was such a space under the dangerous and ferocious 5 poison swamp, a holy land that all cultivators and spirit beasts dreamed of. This was the first time the spirit bird had felt such dense spiritual qi, and it immediately cried out in excitement. It happily flew around Lin Yi and began to play, without the slightest trace of its previous exhaustion. Seeing this, Lin Yi wanted to stop it. Although this place was mystical, it was still an unknown place. Who knew what strange things might be entrenched here? After all, there was a flood dragon formed from the killing intent of the 5 elements above his head. According to the ghostly creature, this was the source space of the 5 poison swamp, so there might be some terrifying existence guarding it. Chapter 45-46, Unexpected Benefits. Chapter 45-43. The more blessed a place was, the more dangerous it was. This was an unchanging truth. It was just like searching for treasures in primitive places. Once he relaxed, he would inevitably pay a heavy price. Lin Yi always remembered this law of survival. It was never a bad thing to be careful. The spirit bird's frolicking might attract something it couldn't resist, so it was better to let it be a little more patient. It's okay, let it play by itself. As long as it doesn't fly far, there shouldn't be a problem. I've used my divine sense to scan the surrounding 100 miles and didn't find any signs of living beings. The ghost thing interrupted. For spirit birds, frolicking is cultivation. This is a rare opportunity for it. Okay then. Lin Yi nodded. Since the ghost thing said so, there shouldn't be a problem. He continued to look around and asked, Senior, how big is it down here? Why does it feel like it's much bigger than the 5 poison swamp above? Since the 5-element killing aura was all colorful, it was a natural light source. Although it wasn't as bright as the ground, the visibility wasn't bad. With Lin Yi's eyesight, it wasn't hindered at all. But with one look, it was endless, and he couldn't see the end of it. It should be, but I'm not too sure about the specific situation. The ancient books only said that there was such a source space, but it didn't say the specific situation. The ghost thing wasn't sure about this, but one thing was for sure. At the very least, its divine sense was far from reaching the end. Compared to the 5 poison swamp above, it was obviously many times bigger. Oh, speaking of which, did you specifically go to ancient books and documents? Is it related to this 5 poison swamp? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. The ghost thing had never been here before. Its understanding of the 5 poison swamp obviously came from ancient books. Under normal circumstances, it wasn't strange to occasionally glance at it in ancient books. But with such a detailed understanding, it must have specially looked it up. I've spent several years investigating this 5 poison swamp, and I've read through all kinds of ancient books and documents. Although I can't directly enter like you, I'm afraid that no one in the world can compare to me in terms of understanding this 5 poison swamp. The ghostly thing said confidently and firmly. Why is that? Could it be that Senior is like the other spirit beasts and wants to take this 5 poison swamp for yourself? Lin Yi joked with a smile. That's not the case. Other than a freak with unique talents like you, no other spirit beasts or human cultivators can withstand the 5 elements' murderous aura. It's the same for me. Actually, it's because of a rumor. The ghostly thing kept him guessing. What rumor? Lin Yi's interest was piqued. Rumor has it that a flood dragon appears in the 5 poison swamp, and it has been seen by other spirit beasts on more than one occasion, the ghostly thing said in a faint voice. Flood dragon? Upon hearing this, Lin Yi was startled and subconsciously raised his head to look at the murderous aura of the 5 elements swimming back and forth. If he had not felt it up close, anyone would think that these were definitely genuine flood dragons. The flood dragons are under the jurisdiction of my dragon clan. Moreover, if there really is a flood dragon, then it's definitely not weak. When I left Heavenly Stage Island, I actually wanted to train a deputy elder of the dragon clan to help me handle matters here. However, in the end, I didn't find a qualified one, so I had to look for one. However, after spending a few years, I ended up with nothing in the end. The ghostly thing paused for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, Now, it seems that the flood dragons they saw were clearly these materialized murderous auras of the 5 elements. They just happened to swim to the surface of the swamp. That should be the case. Lin Yi nodded. Ever since he entered the 5 poison swamp, he had not seen a single living creature. It could only be said that this was a natural land of death. It would be abnormal if a 5 poison flood dragon suddenly appeared. After a pause, Lin Yi asked hesitantly, Senior, what should I do next? This place was a natural treasure trove. The concentration of spirit chi was even denser than in the space of the jade pendant. Perhaps he would never have the chance to encounter such a place again in his lifetime, so Lin Yi did not plan to go up just like that. Of course, he could not go up now. After all, he couldn't fly like the West Mountain Elder Sect Master, and even if he could enter the 5 poison swamp at the top, it would be difficult for him to overcome the huge resistance of the swamp and swim up. Moreover, he couldn't leave Huang Xiaotao's spiritual bird here. Unless the spirit bird did not move like it did when it came down, Lin Yi could barely use his true chi to protect it. However, if the spirit bird did not move, how could he go up? Once it moved, with Lin Yi's current strength, it was very easy for an accident to happen. If an accident really happened in the process, then he would regret it endlessly. Moreover, if he rashly went up now, there was a chance that the West Mountain Elder would not give up and would be guarding the edge of the 5-poison swamp. If he found out that Lin Yi could enter the 5-poison swamp without dying, then he would definitely not rest until he died. In this lifetime, Lin Yi would not be able to take a step out of the 5-poison swamp. However, if he did not go up, then he could only stay in this strange underground space. It was true that the density of spirit chi was extraordinary, but the problem was that who knew what dangers there were in this place. Although Lin Yi did not believe in the existence of a 5-poison flood dragon, his many years of experience made him understand another principle. The risks were always proportional to the benefits. Was such a unique super treasure trove really so safe and harmless? The possibility of this was even lower than the 5-poison flood dragon. If it was in the past, Lin Yi would definitely try to explore this vast and boundless space below. After all, the opportunity was rare, and there might be unexpected surprises. However, after seeing the West Mountain Elder and the super existences of the Spirit Beast clan, Lin Yi's strong self-confidence had long been shaken. As a master at the peak of the middle stage of the Gold Core realm, Lin Yi was now at least 100 times stronger than when he first came to the Heaven Stage Island. However, he did not feel that he was very strong at all. Under the premise that there were no clues, if he dared to explore with this little strength, then he was really tired of living. The space below was much larger than the 5-poison swamp above. God knew if he could find it after going far, and he did not know if he could go up. Or if he went up, maybe there would be other unexpected situations. This place was full of too many uncertainties. What? Do you want to go around now? The ghostly thing said in a mocking tone. Chapter 45-44. Senior, don't joke around, I'm not stupid. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile bitterly. Curiosity not only killed the cat, but it also killed people. Since ancient times, many top experts had died because of curiosity. Since you're not stupid, why don't you hurry up and start practicing? This place is blessed by the heavens, and it's simply the best place for you to practice. If you don't seize the time to practice now, it'll be a waste of the opportunity that the heavens have given you. The ghostly thing said with envy. What do you mean? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. Although he still didn't understand, he faintly felt that this might be an excellent opportunity. An opportunity that could make the ghostly thing, the former Azure Dragon, jealous was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. This is the 5-poison swamp, and you happen to be a person with 5 spiritual roots. Maybe you're the only one in the world. What do you mean? The ghostly thing asked. Hearing the ghostly thing's reminder, Lin Yi had a flash of inspiration and grasped the key point. He became excited, but he still said with some uncertainty, but isn't this the mutual destruction of the 5 elements? These 5 elements' murderous auras at most won't attack me, so how can I use them to practice? For others, the mutual destruction of the 5 elements is absolutely fatal, but for a gifted freak like you, the 5 elements' murderous auras are very useful. It's not as simple as not attacking you. The ghostly thing paused and couldn't help but sigh in its heart. To be honest, it's extremely rare to have 5 spiritual roots at the same time on the heavenly island. I've lived for so long, but I've never heard of a human cultivator with 5 spiritual roots other than spirit beasts. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's unique. Lin Yi slightly raised his eyebrows. He had long known that he had 5 spiritual roots and 7 attributes, but he didn't think that there was anything special about it. At most, he had more spiritual roots, and at most, he could choose a wider range of cultivation methods and martial skills. It was impossible for him to make full use of every spiritual root, even when he participated in the Morning Star Academy selection. After knowing the advantages of having a multi-elemental spiritual root, he didn't think that his spiritual root of the 5 elements and 7 elements would be so rare and unique. Even those 5 elements mediums that open the heavenly island are just pawns in the end. In the end, they won't be able to hold on and will be destroyed. You're the only exception. At this point, the ghostly thing's voice couldn't help but sigh. Your inheritor girlfriends, in order to prevent you from being hurt, each and every one of them risked their lives to protect you. They would rather die themselves to bear the pain for you. This kind of love is really touching. You were able to successfully enter the island in the end because they fought for you. As the former Azure Dragon, the values of this ghostly thing could be said to be very different from those of human cultivators. In particular, he had always scoffed and disdained human relationships. However, this time, the actions of Lin Yi's inheritor's girlfriends had truly moved him for the first time. He had never known that the love between a man and a woman could be so selfless and great. It was truly inconceivable. This kind of thing would never happen with spiritual beasts. Perhaps this was the biggest difference between humans and spiritual beasts. Yeah, I wonder how they are now, the ghostly thing couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, Lin Yi's thoughts were also drawn to the common world. It had been more than a year and a half since he had landed on Heavenly Island. If it was possible, he would fly back to the common world right now. He wanted to see how his girlfriends were doing with his own eyes. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have spent a huge sum of money to get the Central Chamber of Commerce to send a letter at the Zhongdao auction house without hesitation. He didn't know if his letter had reached the common world, and he didn't know if he would receive a reply. Heavenly Island and the common world were two different worlds. There was no way he could get a reply. In the past year and a half, although Lin Yi's strength had increased by at least 100 times, he was still far from achieving his most important goal. He didn't even get to see Zhang Liju, let alone find a way to save his girlfriends. This was a result that made Lin Yi very depressed. However, it wasn't as if there was no progress at all. At least, Lin Yi had established a deep relationship with the two disciples, Kai Zhongyang and Hou Guanqi. This meant that he had opened up a path to meet Zhang Liju in the future. All he needed to do was wait for the right opportunity. Other than that, Lin Yi also received another piece of exciting news. It was the information that the Central Merchant Group revealed. All the signs pointed to the same thing. There was a possibility that there was a two-way path between Heavenly Island and the common world. Those goods were the best proof. These two things were very important to Lin Yi. Zhang Liju meant that he could save people, and a two-way path meant that he could go back to the common world. As long as he was strong enough and had both, then all problems could be solved. Although it wasn't as easy as it sounded, at least Lin Yi wasn't as lost as he was at the beginning. As long as he could find the direction, with his incredible potential, everything would come true one day. Lin Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. The ghost's voice rang in his head, its tone a little complicated. Don't think about useless things like that. There is indeed a two-way path between Heavenly Island and the common world. I can tell you this very clearly, and that Zhang Liju that you're looking for, I actually know him too. What? You know him too, senior? Then why haven't I heard you mention him after so long? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. Looking for Zhang Liju was his most important mission on Heavenly Island. Compared to this, everything else was like floating clouds. It was a pity that Miracle Dr. Dan St. Zhang Liju was a legendary figure. Even though he had stayed in Middle Island for so long and had such a close relationship with Kai Zhongyang and the others, he still didn't get the chance to meet him. It could only be said that the time wasn't right yet. Lin Yi didn't expect that the ghost that stayed in his jade space all day and night actually knew Zhang Liju, but after so long, it didn't even mention a word about him. How secretive! Say my ass. The ghostly thing snorted and paused for a long time before explaining in a faint tone. I had a fight with that old bastard, and we've already gotten into a conflict. I can't be bothered to talk about this with you, brat. Chapter 45-45. Had a fight? What do you mean? Lin Yi's interest was piqued. So this thing had fought with Zhang Liju. One of them was the former Green Dragon Elder, the other was the Saint Dan Doctor. Both of them were top-notch existences in the whole of Sky Division. The battle between the two of them would definitely be exciting, but from the tone of the ghost, it didn't seem to have gotten anything out of Zhang Liju, otherwise, it wouldn't have been so quiet. This wasn't surprising at all. Even if this thing was a top-notch master of the Spirit Beast clan, Zhang Liju was still very famous. Even if Zhang Liju was famous for his elixir refinement and medical skills, he wasn't weak at all. In the entire 5 islands of Sky class, There were only a handful of people who could take him down with ease, perhaps even uncountable. Lin Yi wasn't a gossipy person, but this was related to the battle between the ghost and Zhang Liju, and his curiosity was ignited. It's nothing, we just fought once. The ghost It didn't want to say much, but seeing how excited Lin Yi was, it finally said, back then, that old bastard Zhang Liju found a way to go to the common world, but he needed the help of all 7 of his wives to open the path. Wait, 7? How could there be 7? Didn't he only have 2 wives? Lin Yi froze. Zhang Liju's 2 wives were Master Shui and Master Ice. This was something everyone knew. Even when he came to Sky Division Island, the locals said the same thing. Why were there so many? Even a disciple like you, who you've never met before, has so many girlfriends. How could that old bastard only have 2? The ghost laughed weirdly and said with envy, to be honest, that old bastard's luck is off the charts. He only had 2 wives before he came to Sky Division Island. In the end, he had all kinds of luck with women and found 5 wives in a row. What was even more amazing was that all 7 of his wives had spiritual roots of the 5 elements and 7 attributes. What kind of luck do you think this is? As a spiritual beast, this ghost wasn't interested in how many wives a human could have, but Zhang Liju's 7 wives were all of the 5 elements and 7 elements. This was something to be envious of. After all, this was something that could be put to good use. Lin Yi couldn't help but be speechless as he listened to the ghostly thing's strange laughter. These 7 wives of Zhang Liju's really made one speechless. This cheap Sherfu that he'd never met before couldn't have found them based on the 5 elements and 7 elements, right? Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? But when he thought about himself, forget it, it was better not to talk about others behind their backs. Could it be that he is also a 5 elements cultivator? Otherwise, even if his 7 wives gathered the 5 elements and 7 attributes, without a medium, they wouldn't be able to open the formation channel, right? Lin Yi asked. No, he isn't a 5-element cultivator. Didn't I tell you? You're the only freak that has gathered all 7 elements and 7 attributes. The ghostly thing curled its lips. Then how did he? Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. Unless this cheap Sherfu of his had really created a revolutionary formation channel, otherwise, no matter what he did, he couldn't do without the 5 elements as a medium. It's simple. That old bastard isn't a 5-element cultivator himself, but he has a 5 elements divine stone. The ghostly thing explained. 5 elements divine stone? What's that? Lin Yi raised an eyebrow. It's a rare treasure that can be used as a medium to replace the 5 elements. Other than the one in the old bastard's hand, I'm afraid there's no second one in the world. The ghostly thing's tone was a little bitter. If he had a 5 elements divine stone, perhaps he wouldn't have had to beg that old bastard back then, and so many things wouldn't have happened. Oh, I see. Lin Yi nodded. He didn't show much interest in the 5 elements divine stone. After all, he could be the medium himself. He didn't need the 5 elements divine stone. And then why did you guys start fighting? I spent a great deal of effort to finally find this old bastard, and I humbly asked him to help me open the formation passageway so that I could make a trip to the mortal world. In the end, this old bastard actually didn't agree. Even today, the ghostly thing was still angry when he talked about it. As for why he wanted to go to the common world, it didn't need to be said that it was to find the bloodline of the spirit beast king. But, did you guys have a conflict before? Lin Yi found it strange. Miracle Dr. Dan Zhang Liju was so famous, how could he be a petty person? Even if he wasn't selfless enough to help others, this ghostly thing was still the green dragon elder of the spirit beasts. He shouldn't have no value at all, right? Conflict my ass. This old bastard isn't like the other human practitioners who kill spirit beasts. All he does is concoct pills and save people. What conflict could there be between us? The ghostly thing paused and sighed. The reason why he didn't agree was because he wanted to protect his people. He said that every time the channel was opened, his 7 wives would have to pass out. Even he couldn't guarantee that he could wake them up every time. The risk was huge. Couldn't guarantee? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. Didn't that mean that even if he got Zhang Liju's help, his wives might not be able to wake up? You don't have to be so nervous. It's just an excuse from the old bastard. The miracle doctor Dan Zhongliju is not someone who doesn't deserve his reputation. Although he said he wasn't confident, when have you ever seen him fail? Not even once. That's not confidence, my ass. The ghostly thing consoled and said angrily. In order to get him to help, I tried so hard to convince him to think for the sake of the spirit beasts. As long as he's willing to open the channel, the spirit beasts will always remember his kindness. Will pay any price for it. And he still didn't agree? Lin Yi was speechless. With this ghostly thing's identity as the Green Dragon Elder, making a promise like this was basically the same as getting the entire Spirit Beast clan's approval and support. The Spirit Beasts were a force far above the human sections. This was a benefit that no big boss would reject. Even someone at Zhang Liju's level wouldn't be able to ignore it. Chapter 45-46. What the hell? Why am I involved in this all of a sudden? Lin Yi was speechless as he smiled bitterly. Did he help you after that? I think so, or else how did you get to the common world? The ghost went silent for a while and said faintly, I guess he helped me half. That half? What's that supposed to mean? Lin Yi paused. Nothing much, I just kept bugging him, and that old thing got annoyed by my nagging, so he agreed to fight with me. If I won, he'd help me, but if I lost, then there's nothing left to talk about, and I'd never bother him again, the ghost explained. And then? What happened? Lin Yi asked impatiently. He really wanted to know who was stronger between the ghost and Zhang Liju, these two peak existences. We fought for 3 days and nights, from the sky to the ground to the sea, and in the process, we even destroyed 5 small islands, and neither of us won. It was a draw. The ghost's tone was a little excited as it talked about this. After all, an opponent like Zhang Liju, who was almost undefeatable, was hard to find in this world. Ugh, that was really intense. Lin Yi couldn't help but be speechless. From what he knew, the stronger the practitioner, the more they would focus on killing in one hit, especially at the level of this ghost and Zhang Liju. Normally, they would be able to decide who was stronger in one move, but the two fought for 3 days and 3 nights without a clear winner. It was obvious that they were on par with each other. It was indeed intense. Other than Zhang Liju, I've never met an opponent like this before. Even Vermilion Bird wasn't this difficult to deal with, and it was a piece of cake. I have to say, that old thing is really something. The ghost nodded and sighed. As the previous Green Dragon, he had always been proud and arrogant, and other than the Spirit Beast King, he rarely respected anyone like this. Zhang Liju was a rare exception. What happened after that? Lin Yi continued. After that? No one lost and no one won. The previous bet can't be counted. Since we fought to a draw, I can only help half of it. That old thing didn't help me open the formation passage, but he lent me the 5 elements divine stone, so I can go to the secular world. However, the price I have to pay is that I've been tortured by that huge pressure. I've ended up like this? The ghostly thing said in a self-deprecating manner. I see. Lin Yi nodded. He already knew what happened next, so there was no need to continue asking. But after some thought, he asked, wait, if Zhang Liju didn't open the portal because he didn't want his 7 wives to get hurt, then why did he go to the common world? The reason why he asked this was because Lin Yi suddenly remembered that the cauldron in the tomb had disappeared for some reason. If he was right, it should be Zhang Liju's doing. This meant that he had been to the common world at least once. Could it be that he ran into some emergency that he couldn't even care about his 7 wives? With the protective nature that the ghost described, that didn't seem possible, right? He did tell me. Since it was a tie, he could help me open the formation channel after a while. However, the prerequisite was that he had to wait until his wives' strength had increased to the same realm. Only then would he be able to open the formation channel. At most, they'll just use up some pure chi, and they won't all get hurt or fall unconscious. They'll recover after a few years of rest, so there's no need to take any risks. The ghost said, so that's what you mean. His wives have all fulfilled the requirements, and that's why he can go back and forth between the common world and Sky Class Island. Lin Yi nodded. Isn't that a good suggestion? We just need to wait for a few years, and we won't have to take any risks. Senior, could it be that you can't even wait for a few years? Although the lifespan of a high-level cultivator, especially a top-notch spiritual beast like the ghost, was not endless, it was still extremely long. A few years was just a blink of an eye, and it could be gone by casually in closed-door cultivation. Why would it take such a huge risk to fight for a few years and end up like this? No matter how one looked at it, it was not worth it. Of course not. The ghostly being's voice was scorching, then it smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for the fact that the Spirit Beast clan situation was already in dire straits, based on my personality, why would I lower my pride and ask a human for help? Even when I was facing the Spirit Beast King, I've never been so submissive. If I had waited a few more years, I wouldn't have had any problems, but the Spirit Beast clan has already fallen apart. You've seen how ambitious the Vermilion Bird is, so how could I possibly wait? That's true, but haste makes waste. From what I see, if you hadn't been so impulsive back then and listened to Zhang Liju and waited a few more years, things wouldn't have gotten out of hand like this. At least, with you in the Spirit Beast clan, even if Vermilion Bird got a puppet to become the new Spirit Beast King, it wouldn't be able to do whatever it wants like this. Lin Yi analyzed. Before the situation was clear, it was better to stay put than to take action. This was his experience over the years. However, everyone had a different personality, so naturally, their style of doing things was also different. If the ghost did as he said, then it wouldn't be a ghost. That's true. It's too bad that I didn't meet you back then, kid, or I wouldn't be where I am today. To be honest, you may not be strong, but there are many things that I can learn from you. The ghost sighed. This wasn't just being courteous, it was the truth. Lin Yi was able to grow at such a shocking speed in just a few years, and it wasn't just because of his talent and luck, but also because of his style of doing things. If it were anyone else, even if they had the same talent and luck, they would have been killed a long time ago. Chapter 45-47. The ghost was actually a little embarrassed, and after a long pause, he said weakly, "It's just that this experience is a little embarrassing, what's there to announce? Besides, we weren't that close back then, I didn't have the nerve to tell you about this. My God, if you had told me about this earlier, I wouldn't have had to live in fear for so long." Lin Yi held his forehead, speechless. He had been living in fear for the past 1.5 years, not because of the pressure from his enemies, but because he had been worrying about Zhang Liju. What if Zhang Liju didn't have the confidence to save his women? Or, what if Zhang Liju had the confidence to save them, but couldn't go back to the common world? With Lin Yi's personality, he wouldn't get angry no matter how strong the enemy was, just like how he was facing Shishan Elder right now. At most, he would find a place to hide, and when he was strong enough, he would come back to settle the score. It wasn't a big deal. But the two things he was worried about couldn't be solved with just hard work and practice. Whether or not he could succeed depended on Zhang Liju, and Lin Yi himself couldn't help at all. This feeling of helplessness was the most torturous thing. For the past 1.5 years, Lin Yi couldn't help but worry whenever he closed his eyes, afraid that he would get a negative answer. If it weren't for his strong mental fortitude, any other person would have been tortured to the point of having a nervous breakdown. But at the very least, these two questions were answered by this damn thing, and they were both positive answers as well. It was a cause for celebration, and Lin Yi's heart could finally be at ease. Although Zhang Liju said that he didn't have the confidence to save the inheritor, as the ghost said, he had never failed before, so one could see that he was very confident. As long as there were no accidents, it shouldn't be a problem for him to save the inheritor. Other than that, Lin Yi didn't have to worry about not being able to go back to the common world. Even if he couldn't get a conclusion from the Central Chamber of Commerce in the future, as long as he could find Zhang Liju, there would definitely be a way to open the portal to the common world. This news was like a reassuring pill for Lin. However, after knowing these two pieces of news, Lin Yi wasn't in a rush anymore. Zhang Liju had opened it once 2 years ago, and according to the ghost, his 7 wives needed to rest for a few years before they could recover. He wouldn't be able to open it again in the near future, so there was no point for Lin Yi to worry now. He might as well focus on accumulating his strength. Of course, if there was a chance in the future to explore the secret passageway of the Central Chamber of Commerce, that would be a pleasant surprise as well. However, with Zhang Liju as a reliable option, Lin Yi didn't have to be too insistent on it. He didn't have to worry about it. After all, the Central Chamber of Commerce was full of masters, and it wasn't a place to be messed with. Now that both of his worries had been resolved, Lin Yi's spirit was lifted. There was an obvious change in his spirit compared to before, and although he was still as calm and reserved as before, there was now a sunny aura around him that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. You can't blame me for this. I'm not a gossiper. Why would I keep this kind of embarrassing thing on my lips all day long? You're lucky that you're able to hear it now. I was planning to keep this to myself and never tell anyone else. Now that I've made an exception for you, what's there to be dissatisfied about? The ghost laughed coldly. At the same time, the ghost couldn't help but feel a little emotional. When he was in the common world, he didn't have much interaction with Lin Yi, let alone a close relationship. So when they first came to Sky Class Island, the only thing he did to protect Lin Yi was to keep him alive. Other than that, he didn't care about anything else. But in the past year or so, the two of them had been through thick and thin together, and Lin Yi's temperament was to his liking. Their relationship was completely different from before, and the things he wouldn't say or do in the past weren't strange at all. In fact, he felt that it was only natural for him to do so now. Alright, then I'm really flattered. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and nod. No matter what, the stone in his heart had been lifted, and the next step was clear. He had to increase his strength as much as he could and find Zhang Liju. Other than that, everything else was secondary. Of course. The ghostly thing snickered and returned to the topic at hand. Alright, I've said all that needs to be said. Hurry up and start cultivating. Don't waste this great opportunity. Alright, do you want to scout the surroundings first? Lin Yi didn't plan on exploring this place alone, but at the very least, he needed to know the surroundings like the back of his hand. Otherwise, he might be targeted by some scary being in the middle of his practice. That's not necessary. I'll use my divine sense to keep an eye on the surroundings, and I'll let you know if anything strange happens. The ghost said. In his current state, he didn't dare say anything else, but at least he had absolute confidence in his divine sense. Not only did it not deteriorate, but it had also improved quite a bit compared to when he was at his peak. After all, this was the only thing he could rely on. Alright, I'll leave it to you then, senior. Lin Yi nodded. In fact, even if the ghost didn't keep watch for him, he still had the jade space to warn him. No matter what happened, he would be able to react in time. There was nothing to worry about. After that, Lin Yi turned around and told the spirit bird not to go too far away. Then he leaped onto a high platform next to him. Not only was this underground space empty, but the terrain was also quite strange. Every 100 or so feet, there was a tall, narrow platform. Some of them were directly connected to the top of the swamp, while others were a bit off. The platform that Lin Yi chose just happened to be able to reach the swamp. Standing on the high platform, Lin Yi's body was only a foot away from the swamp. Although he didn't sink into it, the murderous aura of the 5 elements would emerge from time to time. Sometimes, it would affect Lin Yi's body. Lin Yi didn't wrap his body with qi like he did when he first came down. After all, the murderous aura of the 5 elements would ignore him and he wouldn't be able to practice. However, he didn't dare to touch the murderous aura of the 5 elements too rashly, so he didn't go deep into the swamp. Instead, he chose this high platform that was just a little bit above ground. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.